So what do we make of this?
What I'm saying is that number one, we know that they never really retreated from anything except for the Sinai Peninsula because they struck the deal with Egypt. But the point I'm trying to make is that this document was written ambiguously on purpose, and then it didn't address the Palestinian issue. I'm talking more specifically with the Palestinians because it didn't even refer to the Palestinians. They just referred to them as it is basically like a refugee problem. They didn't even refer to them as the Palestinians, and they purposely
Wait, why do you think that is, though?
Well, there was no intention of ever giving them any type of sovereignty.
Because arguably there was no, well, the idea or the existence of like a Palestinian people, that's a more recent phenomenon. I don't even think that really emerged that much until like 47, 48. And then from 48 to 67, the West Bank was occupied by Jordan. Jordan annexed it formally and just made all those people Jordanian citizens. Egypt annexed the Gaza Strip and for 1 year had like a little faux government that they ended up recalling to Cairo and then disbanding almost immediately, like after a year. So there were no Palestinian people there. It wasn't until Israel occupied both territories that all of a sudden some people started to talk about like a Palestinian people. But I believe, 242 just calls it the refugee problem. But another reason why that resolution is not specific
is
because nobody knew what to do at that point. Nobody knows, like, what do you do at that point? Like, the idea, like they're not going to say these territories should be independent. They weren't independent before Israel conquered them. They were owned by Jordan and Egypt, right?
Well, what I'm saying is that it didn't address the problem at all. It didn't address the right of return whatsoever, completely ignored it. And then also on top of that, my argument is they had no intention of having peace because while this was going on, they also bombed the U.S. Liberty, right?
Well, that was during the 6 Day War, right?
Yes. So while this was going on, they bombed the USS Liberty, right? And then after that, they went ahead and tried to get the nuclear. Well, they already had the nuclear bomb at this point.
I don't think they had it in 67, but
yeah, they got it pretty much that year. And so what I'm arguing is that Israel is not a true broker of peace whatsoever, whether it's not acknowledging the Palestinian problem.
Yeah, but you're saying this in a war where all the Arab countries are again like fighting against Israel. It's not like Israel is the one who's like starting these wars, right? The Arab states were.
Well, they started the 67 war.
I mean, like, but
they started it, dude.
Yeah, because the entire Arab world had poised themselves as being about to attack, right?
Well, here's the thing. They started the war, right? They started the war. They didn't address the Palestinian problem, the right of return, etc. When I'm talking about this,
hold on, I'm saying that like, Nasser had already closed down the same straits that had led to a war 10 years earlier, kicked out all of the UN peacekeeping troops to ensure that there wouldn't be another war, and then was telling people, the Arab trade unionists, the next war will be a war of annihilation. I mean, it looked like they were poised for war. You could argue that Israel
but they didn't start though, technically.
Well, no, they didn't start technically, but it was obviously like
because your argument you're saying is that you said that the Arabs started, the Arabs started, they didn't. The Israelis started that one.
No, but they were poised for war. You could argue that the closing of those straits was a casus belli for war. That's like
they had been fighting, bro. They're always poised for war. They're obviously right now they're poised for war. Like you can make the argument
that they're not even close to poised for war right now. That is absolutely not true.
No, I'm saying other countries. I'm saying Israel.
Before the 6 Day War, the Straits of Tiran were closed, weren't they? You know, there were a lot of troops in near Israel's borders. And if you look at historians, a lot of historians say that the Israelis, there were a lot of them reservists called up. So they were in like a state of emergency. So it was more of a state of war more than ever. It wasn't, the whole time.
But here's the thing. You can make the argument that Israel's always in a state of war because they're always getting attacked, right? People are always shooting missiles in there. That's why they have the Iron Dome and everything else like that.
No, wait, that's not true. Hold on, wait. That people are always shooting. No, the Palestinians from the Gaza Strip might have past like the year 2000. But prior to that, there weren't always people just shooting random things. Like this was a huge escalation. Expelling the UN peacekeeper troops and starting to deploy military across the Sinai was a big escalation of stuff. And this was literally what had just caused the prior war. So the assumption was that, I guess they're about to invade again.
Well, again, who started the war? It wasn't the Arabs. You can say that they postured all day, but did they start the war? They didn't. It was the Israelis that started the war in 1967. So what I'm trying to say is that, again, the debate is who is a bigger obstacle to peace? I would argue the Israelis. Because, again, they start the war. They win the war. Fair. Then they don't address the Palestinian issue. They write
how would they have addressed the Palestinian issue? What would they have said or done?
They had a right to return that had been agreed upon before that.
No, there was absolutely no agreement before that. That doesn't make any sense.
The right of return had existed before that, and they completely ignored it in this in 242.
No, right of return had existed before that. Prior to this, we have what the Armenian genocide, the expulsion of some Greeks from Turkey. What do you mean right of return had been agreed upon? No, this is absolutely not the case.
There was the Palestinian right of return after the Nakba. There was the right of return. The 242 didn't address it whatsoever.
There was no right of return after the. I don't know what you're talking about. There was no right of return that was guaranteed by any international or domestic people. Nobody.
Here, I'll get it for you real quick. I had it written down real fast. Yeah, UN General Assembly 194.
What, does that call for a right of return, or does that just say a just resolution to the refugee problem?
That addresses the Palestinians' right to return. UN General Assembly 194. Again, what I'm arguing here is I'm arguing that the Israelis are a bigger obstacle to peace than the Palestinians. And my argument when it comes to the 1967 war is they ambiguously wrote the document, not including the territories. They didn't acknowledge the Palestinians whatsoever. They just left it as like kind of a refugee problem versus the people that were originally there being displaced. They didn't give a shit about them. They didn't acknowledge the right to return whatsoever.
Okay, from 47 for right of return.
And then they're procuring a nuclear bomb, which is not going to help at all.
So the language here is refugees wishing to return to their homes and live at peace with their neighbors should be permitted to do so at the earliest practicable date, and that the compensation should be paid for the property of those choosing not to return.
Yes.
So this wasn't just about Palestinians. There were also Jews that were expelled from the West Bank when that war happened as well. They weren't allowed back. Nobody was allowing anybody back. All of these territories were in conflict with each other.
The majority of the people that were displaced were overwhelmingly Palestinians. We're talking about almost 1 million people.
Yeah, well, 700,000 or so. But that's because the Jews won the war. Yeah, because the Israeli side won. But there were some, I think it was less, it might have been less than 100,000, but there were Jews that were displaced. It doesn't matter with the number. Nobody was seeking to figure out this quote unquote refugee problem when all of these territories were still actively at war with each other.
We're referring to the 1967, right? I'm arguing that the Israelis, I think, are a bigger obstacle to peace than the Palestinians, and that was my arguments for 1967. Once again, ambiguous writing the document, not addressing the Palestinians, the right to return, procuring the nuclear bomb in the middle of all of this, right? Illegally, by the way, doing it by stealing from the United States, which is a whole other huge provocation because of procuring a nuclear bomb is obviously going to escalate things to a whole other level.
Everybody around the world was like doing research on like procure. Like this is when a lot of people around the world were procuring nuclear weapons. Britain and France did their research for it. The Israel did it largely with conjunction of South Africa. I think this is when India and Pakistan were starting like their research projects. Like everybody was trying to get, because it was like Cold War and everybody saw it.
But procuring a nuclear bomb by stealing from your greatest ally and then obviously subverting the president before and
greatest ally. The United States wasn't a huge ally to Israel until like 73.
No, we were absolutely giving them quite a bit of money even during the Kennedy administration, and they were lying to us. Ben Gurion was lying to Kennedy all over the place, so they were betraying
the U.S. was not
one of the greatest allies. Yeah, we were allies with Israel. We definitely were giving them aid even back then in the 60s. We weren't as great as Lyndon B. Johnson started the cucking for Israel, but Kennedy was a supporter of the Israelis, and he wanted to have some type of two-state and peaceful solution with the Arabs and with the Israelis. Obviously, he got killed before he can do that. But
just to be clear, Myron, I think the U.S. sold Israel's first offensive weapon in 1958.
Sure, but they should not have. But they were not allowed to have nuclear weapons, and they were getting them illegally. Against Kennedy's will.
The United States did not provide significant aid to Israel until I think it was like 73, maybe a couple years earlier.
Until Lyndon B. Johnson came in. That's when we started cucking for Israel. Yes, you're right. But what I'm trying to explain here is they went ahead and got a nuclear weapon illegally by stealing from us, who were their allies, and knowing that would escalate tensions in the region by getting a nuclear bomb.
Couldn't they have also got that because they wanted some safety and security, knowing that they wouldn't be destroyed by all of the surrounding Arab states?
No, because them having a nuclear bomb was so that they can basically do what they wanted to do the whole time since the days of Ben Gurion, which was take over the entire region and have a nuclear bomb.
Literally nothing that you're saying is making any sense. You're saying that it's inconceivable that they would have wanted a nuclear bomb to keep their state safe. You're saying instead they got one for offensive purposes. After they got a nuclear bomb, they gave 100%. Land back to the Arabs and made more peace with the Arabs, so their entire plan worked backwards. Nothing that you're saying is causally connected to anything. If what you were saying was true, prospectively, after they got the nuclear bomb, they should have captured Cairo. They should have gone north to Lebanon and taken Beirut, or they should have, crossed the river and taken, more of Jordan, or they should have gone and expanded their territory in the Golan Heights. They didn't do any of this. Their territory receded after they acquired a nuclear bomb. So it seems like it's working exactly the opposite, but somehow you can still explain the same behavioral pattern. I don't understand that at all.
Yes, because here's the thing. The United States basically forced them to play nice with the Egyptians, with Jimmy Carter is getting the Camp David Accords in 1978. Because, again, we didn't want to foot the bill for their recklessness.
Why would we have to foot the bill for anything? We could just let them fight. And I think it was Sadat that was pushing for peace more so than anybody in the United States. I think the United States eventually became a mediator or facilitator under Carter more than anything else. But
well, yes, we facilitated, but at the same time, we didn't want to foot the bill for all their wars because obviously it had been creating quite a bit of issues. And then also the Yom Kippur War.
Why
was
would
a
we
very
not want to
close call.
foot the bill for their wars? We were literally doing this all over the world. It was the Cold War time. We were doing this all over South America. We were already, helping like Mujahideen in the Middle East, in Afghanistan. Like we were footing the bill everywhere. This is the whole. This is the whole Cold War.
Even more so, not wanting to foot the bill because again, when it comes to Egypt and Jordan, they're in strategically good positions where, hey, you know what? You should be allies with them so that we don't have to necessarily foot the bill where these guys constantly have to defend themselves. Also, the other thing you got to keep in mind was the Yom Kippur War in 1973, where they threatened to use a nuclear bomb. So that was another reason why we needed to.
I don't think nobody threatened.
Who did Israel threaten to use a nuclear bomb on?
Nobody.
They absolutely.
On who?
Golda Meir literally called Nixon and said, if you don't give us the airlift, we are going to drop a nuclear bomb on these guys as they're invading us because they were going to lose the Yom Kippur War. Everybody knows this. Nixon literally got nuclear blackmailed with the nuclear bombs, by the way, that they illegally stole from us. I want to make that very clear. These nuclear weapons that they got them from us and they stole them from us, okay, against John F. Kennedy. So Nixon said, yo, we got to do this. And he basically gave them the biggest airlift ever so he can win the war. Otherwise, they would have lost. So what I'm saying is that the Israelis not only... What was that?
Where do you find that? Where's the source for that? That the Israel threatened to
look
use nuclear bomb?
Look it up. Look it up. Golda Meir, Yom Kippur War. She was absolutely going to use the nuclear bomb against the Arabs because they were losing.
Well, hold on, wait. Because they were losing is a lot different than because they were threatening to nuke somebody.
Yeah, they were losing the war and they were going to use the nuclear bomb.
Yeah, I think they were internally considering that. But I don't think that's what made the U.S. cave to helping them.
That's 100% why the U.S. caved. They did not want them to drop a nuclear bomb.
So you're saying that if Israel didn't have a nuclear bomb at that point, that the United States would have just watched the entire Middle East be ran by the Soviet Union?
We would not have given them the aid as quickly because Kissinger at the time.
No, wait, hold on. You're saying that the United States would have watched Israel collapse. Yeah, and then you're saying something else. You're saying the U.S. would have watched Israel be completely destroyed in the Middle East and just ceded that whole region to the Soviets.
There's a good chance, yeah, because Henry Kissinger did not want to get involved in that bullshit.
Why were we so involved in the Afghan civil war then? Why were we supplying so much and doing so much training and everything for the Mujahideen or in other places in the Middle East?
Well, again, they were Osama bin Laden had a very capable rebel force where he was fighting. We were giving him weapons and money and shit like that. But keep in mind, Osama bin Laden was a multi-millionaire. His family were billionaires in Saudi Arabia. They built up the entire infrastructure. So he was very well equipped to handle things on his own. Yes, we gave some aid and support and everything else like that, but we didn't need to give him the same amount of help as the Israelis. And again, it's very important for you guys to understand. The Israelis got the nuclear weapon by stealing the technology from us against the will of a former U.S. president. That's a problem. That's a big problem.
So just to recap, you're saying that the reason why the U.S. in the 1973 war, I presume we're going to that one now, the reason why they gave $2.2 billion worth of aid to Israel and that they called DEFCON 3 against the USSR was just because Israel threatened them with a nuclear bomb.
They were going to drop a nuclear bomb on their enemies, and that was a big problem because obviously, that would be a big escalation, and Nixon could not afford that. So he gave Golda Meir the aid that she wanted, and that's what ended up happening. That's how they won the Yom Kippur War. They were going to lose. But I wasn't even gonna. But again, I'm using the only reason I'm even bringing up the Yom Kippur War is because I'm making the argument that the Israelis don't do any. They're the bigger brokers of chaos. And they don't negotiate for peace whatsoever. And I'm using the nuclear bomb. Them getting a nuclear bomb, right, in 1967 created instability throughout the region, is what I'm trying to say. Because my argument is that...
Peace? Do they not want? Do you not think they want peace as a country?
No, not right now. I think what they want is a hegemony, and they're going to do whatever they need to do to get that hegemony, to include stealing the nuclear weapons and running their cowboy foreign policy. We could fast forward to now if you want, but this one, I was going to go into the Oslo Accords next.
Well, post 73, what's like a more stable, if Israel's causing chaos or Israel's like a chaotic country, who is a more stable country to look towards, like after 73 besides Israel? Like, isn't Israel one of the more stable countries in the Middle East?
Well, again, they're stable because they've stolen nuclear technology from us, and they get aid from us. Like, that's why Israel would not exist without the United States. at all.
I mean, well, I
They'd be
mean, much
overtaken
the same. I mean, the Soviet-backed Arab states would have probably all been even more annihilated by Israel prior to any U.S. involvement if the Soviets weren't backing them. No.
I mean,
Yes.
you know, we don't know because that's like, you know, who knows, right? But the point, my argument is simply that I think, again, I'm not saying the Arab world is perfect, guys. I'm not saying the Arab world don't create problems and that they're not that they're bad brokers of peace too. The argument I'm making is that the Israelis are a far bigger obstacle to peace than anywhere in the Arab world. Even though we go and blame the Arab world for all the problems, but we never actually look at the documents. We don't look at what Israel does behind the scenes. I mean, you guys didn't even know that they illegally got a nuclear weapon, and this is on purpose.
I don't even know if they. I've heard that claim, but like most of their testing and everything was with South Africa. What are you claiming exactly that they stole from the U.S.? They stole the weapon, the technology, or the uranium, or what? Which part?
Yeah, they stole uranium. They were building a nuclear program against the wishes of John F. Kennedy. John F. Kennedy told them.
No, just in terms of what they stole. You said so they stole all the enriched uranium they stole from the United States?
They stole enriched uranium from the United States. And then on top of that, Kennedy knew that they were running a nuclear program, and he told them, you guys got to stop. We need inspections. And Ben-Gurion lied to him. He even made a fake nuclear panel for inspection. Kennedy found out, and he got pissed off. And his brother was trying to get the Zionist organization, which is now AIPAC.
Sure, but other people around the world were also pursuing nuclear programs. It wasn't just Israel, right? A lot of people in the Cold War were pursuing nuclear programs. We didn't really want anybody to, but people were. And we didn't stop them. Fucking Pakistan has nuclear weapons, right? I think more people would be happy with Israel having nukes than Pakistan.
But fair. Here's the difference, though. Here's the difference. We were giving them aid. So Kennedy told them, if you guys keep building your nuclear program, we are going to stop giving you aid. And guess what happened? Ben-Gurion resigned. The first prime minister of Israel resigned to buy himself more time.
Wait, resigned in what year?
This is 1960 shit.
I think in 67, I think Ben-Gurion was still the prime minister, right? For 67?
I think he might have resigned
afterwards,
that year.
did he resign or did he just not run for PM again? Wasn't he old at that point?
He completely left. He completely left because he left because Kennedy was putting pressure on him, and he needed more time. They needed more time to get the nuclear bomb. Well, Kennedy was dead by 63, but I don't
think we weren't giving them much aid under Kennedy. How much aid were we giving Israel in 63?
We were giving them quite a bit, and then we upped it even more once Lyndon B. Johnson came in.
I disagree. I would have to see. I don't think we were giving that much aid. I don't think it was until 1970 that we started to, and then really 73 is when we started pumping the aid.
Lyndon B. Johnson was the beginning of the ushering of the super pro-Israel foreign policy that we have. He basically made the guys on the USS Liberty sign gag orders, even though they had attacked us, and that was an act of war. He doubled or tripled the foreign aid to Israel. His family, one of his
I understand what you're saying.
I'm saying
my claim is I don't think we were giving significant aid prior to 1970. I don't know if there's a place I can look this up where I can see this. Can I look? Because if I Google anything about aid to Israel, all the numbers basically started in 1970. I don't think so. We were
100%. We were giving them aid because that is precisely why Ben-Gurion stepped down, because Kennedy said, if you do not comply with these nuclear inspections, we are going to our aid of us giving you aid is going to be significantly impacted. Basically, he said what he basically told him is we're going to stop giving you aid. He worded it much nicer than that.
I think we've gone around the nuclear part. It's probably best to just go forward.
Yeah, my argument, the whole nuclear angle, the only reason I'm even bringing up the nuclear bomb is that what I'm saying is that the Israelis are willing to backstab allies to illegally get a nuclear bomb to conduct and or what they say, to protect ourselves. But no, it's so that they can be more aggressive. Look at how more aggressive Israel's been since getting the nuclear bomb. But let's go into the Camp David Accords. I'm going to, that was for Egypt and Egypt and Israel to have peace. Basically, when I can begin, and Sadat, I don't count that.
Yeah, I mean, like, there's so many little things here, like that we're just like completely indifferent. At this point, we're talking in different realities.
That's fine.
Like the Apollo affair didn't happen when we were strong allies with Israel. It was in 65, so we wouldn't have been considered strong allies at that point. We weren't giving them a ton of money at that point. I don't think
we're still giving them quite a bit, though.
I don't believe that's true.
We're still giving them a lot.
No, we weren't. We weren't. Yeah, we weren't. The idea
enough
that
enough for Ben-Gurion to resign. It was that much aid that he resigned. That's significant.
Resign
about the first
what
prime
is the claim you're
Israel.
making, that he resigned so that they would investigate, but they couldn't find the nukes anyway? Or
it's simple. Kennedy told Ben-Gurion, "We know that you have a nuclear program." He wrote a flurry of angry letters at him saying, "We know that you have a nuclear weapon, and we need to do nuclear testing." Ben-Gurion stalled. First he denied, then he said, "Okay, you can come inspect." They send the inspectors over there. It's a fake nuclear panel, not real whatsoever. They make a whole fake thing. So Kennedy is like, okay, we are not going to give you aid anymore if you guys don't comply with these nuclear inspections. What did Ben Gurion do? He resigns.
Why would that matter for him resigning? How would that prevent nuclear inspection?
Because what ended up happening was when in the interim, while they're trying to find a new PM, that bought him time to get a replacement. So
wait, that doesn't make any sense. It's not like they didn't have a prime minister for years after he resigned. He would choose a successor, Eshkol after, whatever. The idea, like, why wouldn't they just do the inspection right after? This doesn't make any sense. That he thinks that they're going to nuclear inspect, so he just pushes the resign button, and then they get 100 free turns. No,
he literally left so that his replacement would be like, oh, I'm not familiar with what's going on, John. Please aware me. Of course, Kennedy got killed later on, right? So they didn't really get to finish this. But the reason why he did that, remember, bro, this is the 60s. They're writing telegrams to each other. Right, so this bought him a significant amount of time.
Had telegram? Isn't that electronic? It's not like telegrams are taking years or whatever to get.
No, it took time to get over there.
They didn't have a way to pick up a. There were no phones in 1960. They didn't have phones in the 60s and 50s.
It's classified. Got it. There's classified documents. They have to write it in a different way. You can look it up, bro. I'm not like, yo, this
I think that they had ways to instantaneously communicate with each other. I don't think that there'd be weeks and weeks of delays.
That's fine. The point is that Ben Gurion resigned when he got pressure to have nuclear inspections. That's the bottom line.
Okay. I mean, I disagree. We can try to move on from this factor, but
sure, probably best that's to move on. We're just going to go around.
Yeah, that's fine.
Stephen, should we go on to the Camp David Accords?
Okay, yeah, we can go to, no, Camp David I was going to skip because that's just a peace treaty between Egypt and Israel.
The title of the debate is who's a big obstacle to peace. Wouldn't them doing a peace deal with Egypt show that they do want peace?
Well, I'm referring to the Palestinians in this case.
Okay,
because they completely, yes, they made peace with Egypt, but they made peace with Egypt from a strategic position, which you can make the argument, oh, well, Myron, everything is done strategically fair, but they completely ignored the Palestinians. And the Camp David Accords are often utilized as a peace plan where they say, look, the Palestinians rejected this too. They rejected every single peace plan. They rejected the PLO Commission. They rejected the 47 partition. They rejected the 67. And they use the Camp David Accords, even though it's not the Palestinians aren't even mentioning it.
No one here is claiming that.
Yeah, no, not you guys, but I'm saying in general, like other Zionists I've debated have tried to say that on me, that like, oh yeah, they rejected the 78 Camp David Accords. I'm like, dude, the Palestinians weren't even involved in that discussion whatsoever. And then on top of that, I would argue that the Israelis did that because they knew that the Egyptians were a powerful ally of the Palestinians, right, in the Arab world, and that would create even more problems because, like, there's no way that they didn't foresee, okay, if we go ahead and we do this with the Egyptians, that this is going to create issues as well. Because what we saw later on, if you fast forward to 2020, was the Israelis doing this where they're, circumventing the Palestinians with the Abraham Accords that led directly to October 7th. So on one side, they say, oh, look, we're doing peace. We're negotiating with these Arab countries, but they never answer the Palestinian question. And that's what I'm trying to say. They never had an intention on a two-state solution, making peace with Palestinians, giving them the right to self-determination, any type of sovereignty. They circumvented it every single way, whether it's doing side deals with other Arab countries, whatever.
Do you think that they offered to Egypt, part of the Camp David Accords, to keep Gaza? They offered it to Egypt, and Egypt said no. Does that make any difference to you or not really?
No, because my argument is that they don't really care about doing anything for the Palestinians. They want to get them out of there. And I think what we have proof of that now. I think I'm being vindicated because they're getting the Gazans out of there now. They're trying to do an ethnic cleansing right now as we speak. They bombed Qatar, who was the negotiators, because they don't care about necessarily doing peace. They're like, oh, you know what? Let's go ahead and invade the sovereignty of Qatar, who's one of the middlemen, and bomb these Hamas guys, right? And not even get them and look like idiots in the world stage and make ourselves look bad in front of UAE, Saudi Arabia, Qatar, make the Gulf states question our alliance or potentially joining the Abraham Accords later on, because Saudi Arabia is going to actually join the Abraham Accords. So there's just so much, there's just so many things that the Israelis have done to sabotage, but we can go into the Oslo Accords. I can give my position on that one.
Yeah, Stephen, are you happy to move on to the Oslo Accords?
I mean, I guess, but we're at like totally different.
We don't have to agree, Stephen. I mean, it's for the people. Like, you gave your arguments, I gave mine. People can agree or disagree. I'm sure your audience might say, what the hell? My audience might say, what the hell? It's fine. We don't have to agree. And that's totally
I guess, like, broadly speaking, is there a single, like, peace agreement that has been presented to Israel that's on the table to solve, like, the Palestinian problem that, like, Israel has rejected during negotiations?
You mean the closest? You mean the one that, like, the Palestinians rejected that could have done something? You mean
like where Palestinians are like, this is what we want, and then we will accept peace during any negotiation ever?
I think the Oslo Accords and the 2002 Arab Summit, Arab Peace Initiative.
So the Oslo Accords were never going to be. That was never a peace agreement. That was just like a framework to kind of move in the direction of hopefully figuring stuff out. So the Oslo Accords happened, and Oslo II happened. The Arab Peace Initiative is that's not like a formal agreement. That's just the Arab states are like, all of us are coming together and hoping that something works out.
And the Israelis didn't want to do that either, because they never wanted peace with. They never wanted.
Well, we don't even know the Arab peace initiative doesn't mean anything. It's just like a general statement of things, but nobody knows.
Okay.
Because nobody wants to touch the refugee question on the Palestinian side. Nobody will negotiate that, and they've avoided it intentionally over and over again.
And I'm really glad that you mentioned that. And that is because here's the thing: if you notice, when I make the argument that Israelis are a bigger obstacle to peace, notice how I'm saying a bigger obstacle to peace, especially when it comes to the Palestinians. Because here's the problem: until the Palestinians either A, get their own state, or get absorbed into Israel and get some type of freedom and get the right to self-determination, there's never going to be peace in the Middle East. So if this Palestine question is not answered, there's going to continuously be warfare, and Israel will never have peace. That's the cold, hard reality. The Arab world is never going to rest. The Muslim world is never going to rest until the Palestinians have some level of sovereignty. So notice how I bring everything back always to they circumvent the Palestinians. They don't deal with the Palestinians. Let's deal with the Egyptians here. Let's deal with the Bahrain over here. Let's deal with UAE. That doesn't fucking matter. Until they deal with the Palestinian question, which Netanyahu has done everything in his power to avoid since the Oslo Accords, which I was going to get into here. I do think the Oslo Accords was the closest we ever came to something, even though still bullshit. But at least, like you said, Destiny, it created the framework for us to potentially get somewhere. But what did the Israelis do? Well, let's go over the Oslo Accords real quick. Then I'll talk about what the Israelis did, and then you can give me your rebuttal to it. But basically, the 93 Oslo Accords, right, between Yitzhak Rabin and our boy Yasser Arafat. Let's see here. So basically, Arafat agreed. He gave them a bunch of things. He recognized Israel has the right to exist with peace and security, which was huge. They had never gotten that before. He accepted Resolution 242, which is the partition plan, and then he renounced violence. Furthest they've ever gotten. All Yitzhak Rabin gave him in exchange was recognize the PLO as the reps of the Palestinian people with no state or right to self-determination. They give them autonomy, which we know is bullshit, because the Palestinian Authority, who basically ran things, was nothing more than a Shin Bet shell. Basically, Shin Bet, IDF, etc., would use the PA to collect information, and then they would act as almost like a security force on behalf of the Israeli government. And obviously, this created a lot of issues, because this is precisely why Hamas was able to rise. Because they're like, yo, these guys don't really care about the Palestinians. These guys are literally working for the Israelis. And how do I know this? Even in Israeli TV. I watch Israeli television, as much as you guys might not know this. I've seen the show Fauda. In Fauda, the Israelis even admit and show in their own television that the Palestinian Authority collaborates with them. So why the hell are the Palestinians going to respect them or take them seriously? It created a huge rift, but just was great for Benjamin Netanyahu later on, because he was able to use that division to his advantage, because people didn't trust the Palestinian Authority. So the problem with the Oslo Accords was it was always to be revisited later, right? And while this was happening, it being revisited later, the West Bank is still expanding. They're still taking territory. The illegal settlements are expanding. So the other problem also with the Oslo Accords was it fragmented the Palestinian territory, where it was never contiguous. So what they would have to do is they'd have to use these roads, have all these checkpoints or whatever. So they're never able to actually establish any type of commerce with Jordan. They didn't control their borders. They didn't control their airspace. They didn't control their resources. The Israelis controlled everything. And the illegal settlements continued to expand. And then on top of that, the only thing the Oslo Accords let them have was a limited police force. Meanwhile, the Israelis and the settlers all had M4s, they all had rifles, and then they could reserve the right to go ahead and go into any of these territories, the A, B, and C territories, which the Israelis, I think, controlled C, which is like 60% of the West Bank. So it was bullshit, man. So Yasser Arafat obviously accepted it, and a lot of people got mad. And then, even though they got this lopsided deal, guess what happens? Yitzhak Rabin, who had signed this lopsided deal, which gave all of them the advantage, they couldn't even agree to that. They killed him. The Israelis killed him. So the only chance that—
What do you mean the Israelis killed him? It was a sole murderer.
Yes, a member of the Likud party, which is a big representation, which is running Israel right now, literally assassinated Yitzhak Rabin. So
but the Likud party didn't do it. It was a lone extremist member, wasn't it?
No, he was a member of the Likud party. He was a 100% a member of the Likud party. And then the year after, your boy Benjamin Netanyahu goes ahead and becomes prime minister. And to this day, Yitzhak Rabin's wife thinks Benjamin Netanyahu is behind the murder. And honestly, I'm not too surprised, because what happened after Yitzhak Rabin got killed? Now the clean break memo comes out. Now the Institute for for Foreign Affairs comes out. You got all these neocons that come out and write up this paper about securing the realm. Then you got the rise of the PNAC, etc. So with Yitzhak Rabin being killed, the Oslo Accords died alongside him, and then Netanyahu comes in, and what did he do? He's caught in the fucking village in the West Bank talking about how he sabotaged the Oslo Accords, how there's never going to be a two-state solution, how the Palestinians are never going to have any type of sovereignty. He said it today after the Brits and the Australians recognized Palestinian state. He said they're never going to be a Palestinian state. Obviously, he did it in Hebrew. He did it in the Israeli media. But the point is this. Yitzhak Rabin came the closest to having any type of deal, even though the Palestinians didn't get shit for it. All they got was basically a snitch force with the Palestinian Authority. And then on top of that, for him doing that, he got assassinated by the Likud party, and then Benjamin Netanyahu took over. The Oslo Accords were the closest, and they killed him even for that. So the Israelis have no intention whatsoever of having peace. The one guy that came an inch closer to peace, they fucking killed him.
Stephen, you've got a lot to respond to.
Yeah, I mean, we're just in totally different realities. So the Oslo Accords were never supposed to be the final settlement. I think that people were inspired after the piecemeal deal that had been made with Egypt in terms of giving back the Sinai, and then piece by piece, eventually, Israel had achieved like a formal peace with Egypt. Sadat was also assassinated after that peace deal had been reached, by the way. Hafez
Well,
Assad,
Oslo had nothing to do with Oslo had nothing to do with Egypt.
I didn't say that, but Sadat was assassinated after he had agreed formally to peace with Israel. Some people theorize that the guy that killed him was because, again, like a lot of people that are, dug in on wanting to fight forever between Arabs and Jews don't like it when people make peace deals.
Here's the difference. The Camp David Accords didn't die, though.
What?
Here's the difference. The Camp David Accords did not die with Sadat. The Oslo Accords died with Yitzhak Rabin.
The Oslo Accords didn't necessarily die. The Oslo II came after. The issue is that they never reached a final state. But also you have an issue, too, where the fact is Arafat never really wanted to stop fighting. The guy was a general. The foundation of the PLO and Arafat's popularity in the Palestinian and larger Arab world was that of a resistance fighter. The whole name and party that he'd carved out for himself, as well as all of the kind of like terrorist mini parties that were a part of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, the Palestinian Liberation Front, the Palestinian Defense Force, the PFLP, the BDF, all these other, or the DFLP, like these things, like they were fighters. They were, they were involved in plane hijackings around the world. They killed a couple of Jewish athletes in Munich. This is what they did. The Mossad had their stuff against the Arabs. The Palestinians had their stuff against Israel. These guys were at each other's throats constantly during like the 60s and 70s. As you move forward, you get to Oslo 1, which was 93. Oslo 2 was 95, I think. You get you have some agreements, but these are just like larger frameworks that is hopefully going towards Palestinians having an independent state. Now, the most noteworthy thing was the creation of the Palestinian Authority, which was an actual official Palestinian government. Now, yes, there is the propaganda line that you're giving that they're just security subcontractors for Israel. That's the line that everybody who is incentivized into having infinite conflict between both sides will take, though. Arabs will look at the Palestinian Authority and go, oh, they're a security subcontractor. Jews will look at the Palestinian Authority and go, oh, the PA, well, they're part of the, basically ran by the PLO. They have the Martyr Fund. They pay shaheeds and everybody else to go and kill themselves, while blowing up Jewish people anyways. Well, there was no sovereignty yet. They're on their way. They have some kind of sovereignty over Area A. Area B is your connective areas that I think still have Israeli security involved. And then Area C are mainly your Green Line settlements on the west. But it was supposed to be, steps towards a peace process. But the issue is Arafat would never, ever, ever, ever agree to any peace ever because he would never list final terms or final settlements or final agreements for what peace would look like. Now, you can argue that Israel betrayed the terms of, it was not very simple what they wanted. It's absolutely true.
They want a two-state solution and the right to self-determination. That's simple. But the Israelis would never let that happen.
Even what you just say, a two-state solution, what do you do with Israel? There was never an agreement on what would happen with
Israel would exist.
Temple Mount. I'm sorry, I misspoke. I'm sorry. What do you do with Jerusalem and East Jerusalem?
East Jerusalem would be the capital for the Palestinians.
No,
but the Israelis would never agree to that. That's what they wanted.
Well, wait. They might not have agreed to that because generally, when East Jerusalem is brought up in talks, Arabs are not okay with Jews visiting the Western Wall ever because Arabs don't believe that there was ever an old temple there, so they would restrict access at every point in history when Arabs have been in control.
Are you talking about the Western Wall or the Mount?
The Western Wall is the Temple Mount. The Western Wall is the Western Wall.
I think you're talking about the Mount where the Al-Aqsa Mosque is.
That's
the wall. The Wailing Wall. They can go there, of course.
That's where the Western Wall is. They're both there. But no, Arabs would not allow Jews to go there because they don't believe a temple. They don't believe that's a Western wall, a last standing wall of some Jewish temple. They refuse that any Jewish temple there ever exists because even though people in the West are keen to argue that, well, we're only going to run the clock on history since the Ottomans were there, that's not true. The Arabs want to run the clock back indefinitely, and they believe that it was always Arabs there and there was no Jewish temple there. So they would never allow Jews. Every time it's been owned in history by Arabs, Jews were not allowed to pray at the Wailing Wall. It's only when Israel has been in control of it that right now I think it's a Jordanian Waqf or whatever that runs it that allows Jews, to go to the Wailing Wall and allows Arabs to go to Alaska Mosque or whatever.
Yeah.
But
people could visit the Mount. They could visit the Mount.
They wouldn't not if the Arabs controlled it. So what would happen with East Jerusalem has never been settled. That's never been put on paper. Number one. Number two, the right of return question has never been tackled by any Arab leader, not by Arafat, not by Mahmoud Abbas. Nobody has ever put a number on paper for how many people are allowed back. That's always been
because the Israelis will never let it happen. The Israelis will never let it. Here's the thing.
Because there are 5 million refugees that Palestinians argue should be allowed to return to Israel proper.
And they're never going to let that. And I understand
because most of these refugees have never even set foot in Israel. A lot of the people that are considered refugees were people that had full Jordanian citizenship, but they're still considered refugees even though they were made full citizens of Jordan and live in Jordan and have lived in Jordan for over 2 generations.
Here's the thing. I said before at the top that
first,
the right
you'll acknowledge that Palestinians have never put a number on paper that it seems like in their world, 5 million Arabs have to be allowed to emigrate into Israel proper and have full citizenship there. That would make Jews a minority in Israel. That's always part of the thing, the unspoken thing in the background that no Palestinian leader has ever given up.
Well, yeah, that's literally why I say Israel is an apartheid ethno-state.
Okay, that's fine, but realistically, that's a non-starter. That's never happening that Jews are losing their state to Arabs. So in that case,
because they have to maintain the 80% majority. Yes,
not necessarily 80%, but they have to maintain some kind of Jewish ethnic majority. Otherwise, they feel like they'll probably be treated the way they were in every other Arab state.
They'll feel like they'll get overrun or whatever. But look, the point I'm trying to make is here with the Oslo Accords in general. Is that, yes, I understand what you're saying. You're saying the Oslo Accords were a framework to work towards something. My argument is, even when they had that framework, what did the Israelis do? I'm talking about the Israelis now. I'm not just talking about Yitzhak Rabin or whatever.
Both sides fucked around. Both sides fucked around. There was still violence on the Arab side, and there were still expansions of settlements on the Israeli side. Both sides accused each other of sabotaging the deal, and both sides kind of sort of, were fucking around for sure.
But here's the difference, though. See, at least you mentioned Sadat got killed. The Camp David Accords didn't get killed alongside him. They still maintain peace to this day. Hell, the Egyptians even warned the Israelis about October 7th.
Sure.
Here's the difference. When Yitzhak Rabin got killed, because Yitzhak Rabin got killed for giving the Palestinians the Palestinian Authority. He got killed for that, and then Netanyahu came in and then sabotaged everything.
That's not true. The Oslo Accords are still active. The Palestinian Authority still exists. Yes, they are. Area A, B, and C are still there. The Palestinian Authority still exists. They did the division of Hebron, and they moved most of the Jews out of there. They live in the H1 section of H2 or whatever, so there's the redeployment there. The Oslo Accords are still in effect, but the Oslo Accords were just temporary. They were never supposed to be a final arrangement. We have nothing.
But that's my point. So it was a framework towards something better to eventually get to a two-state solution.
Yes, but the problem is, no.
They sabotage. That is the definition of being an obstacle.
It doesn't matter. Arafat never agreed to any final deal anyways. Arafat could have agreed with Netanyahu to something. Arafat could have agreed with Barak for something, but they didn't. They never did. Arafat never made any final agreement ever because he always wanted to see the fighting continue because he always thought the Arabs could get more.
That's not true because he wanted, again, all they wanted, self-determination, two-state solution, East Jerusalem as the capital. That's what the Palestinians have always wanted, pretty much. Okay,
infinite right of return of 5 million refugees back to Israel proper.
I didn't even say right of return.
But that's what they want. That's the problem. It's never been put on paper.
No. Even the right of return, bro. A lot of them have given that up. It's
no, they haven't. No, none of them have given that up. That's absolutely
borders.
The borders don't matter. They don't care about the land. That's not the important thing. The important thing is what to do with the holy landmarks, especially in East Jerusalem, and what to do with the Palestinian right of return, and then what sovereignty they have.
My point here is, remember, the debate is who is the bigger obstacle to peace. I'm saying when Yitzhak Rabin tried to create a peace deal with the Oslo Accords, which would work towards a two-state solution, that's what it was there for. That's why Yitzhak Rabin, that's why Arafat even came to the table, right, was eventually to get some right of self-determination for the Palestinians. What did they do? They killed Yitzhak Rabin. They killed him. The Israelis killed him, and then they put Netanyahu. And then Netanyahu
it's a
comes in
contentious
power.
region. Yeah, a lot of people like to fight there. Yes,
sure. But that is precisely my point. The Israelis are the bigger obstacle to peace because even when the Palestinians came in good faith with the Oslo Accords, what did they do? They killed the guy that negotiated it, and then Netanyahu comes in and he admits on video, "I am here to sabotage the Oslo Accords. They're never going to get a state."
The Oslo Accords, but despite that, they still continued, and they had another shot at peace 5 years later with Ehud Barak. And they didn't take that either.
No, the Ehud Barak, we could talk about that. The 2000 camps, that was bullshit too. That was complete. That was even worse.
Let's move on to the Clinton parameters in 2000.
Sure, we can go into that. But again, I just want to be clear about this. The debate here for me is about who is a bigger obstacle to peace. I agree that Yitzhak Rabin came in some degree with good faith, even though he made almost no concessions. And then Yasser Arafat came in and made a lot of concessions. That's how I know he came in good faith because
wait, who came in and made a lot of concessions?
Yasser Arafat made way more
concessions. He
concessions.
didn't make any concession. What are you talking about? They had no state. They had nothing to concede. What?
Okay, no, he conceded, bro. He literally conceded that Israel has a right to exist. Okay, and peace and security.
Yeah,
That's
these are
huge.
words on paper. And then he goes to universities. He's making speeches about strategically lying or whatever when it comes to making deals with the infidel or whatever. He said things, but the problem is like in the Second Intifada, he never denounced violence, and violence continued, and that was one of the huge things that moved.
But that was after the Oslo Accords were sabotaged by Netanyahu.
The Oslo Accords were still in place. The Palestinian Authority still exists today. Area A, B, and C still exists today. They're not sabotaged. They're not gone. They're still in place.
No, he did sabotage them because what did he say? Oh, I'm going to destroy the Oslo Accords. I'm not going to make it work. The Palestinian Authority has no power because, again,
why would he say that? Of course he said that. He came in right after the last guy who supported the Oslo Accords got assassinated. Of course he came in saying he hated the fucking Oslo Accords. But there's still political realities you have to contend with in Israel, and people at that point on both sides,
you have
no proof of that. There's no evidence of that.
Yitzhak Rabin's wife to this day wrote
I don't
a book
care what his wife said. Who cares? What is that? Does she have some intelligence or some reason to think? Like some actual? No.
She's his wife.
Okay.
She wrote a book and she literally said Netanyahu killed my husband.
All right.
And the guy that killed him was a Likud party guy. Who's the head of the Likud party right now? Netanyahu. Sounds pretty fucking clear to me.
It's not. Being in a political party means that you were ordered by the party to go kill somebody? Okay.
The head of the party, yes, for sure.
Okay.
Yeah, for sure. Now, again, with that said, Yasser Arafat conceded Israelis have a right to peace and security, live in peace and security. He recognized the Israeli state, which was huge. No Arab country had really done that
because
yet,
it didn't matter.
Besides the other ones, it did matter. It did matter.
It didn't matter. By that point, Jordan and Egypt had already formally signed peace treaties. Most of the Arab states at that point were done. And also because they're done fighting, because they don't want to fight with Israel anymore. They recognize they're going to be there, and there's nothing else they can do about it.
They were getting paid. They're literally bought off by the Americans. That's why they did that. Now, but for Yasser Arafat, he comes in. Hey, we're going to recognize you guys. We're going to give you guys peace, and we're going to denounce violence. That was huge.
But he didn't denounce violence.
To do that. He did.
He literally didn't. He actually didn't. Through the whole Second Intifada, everybody was looking to Arafat to call down the violence, and he didn't. He refused to do so.
The Second Intifada started because the Israelis didn't fucking honor the Oslo Accords at all. So, because here's the thing, you're going to the end here saying Intifada. But how did we get there? Okay, 1993, they signed the Oslo Accords. They're right there in the White House and everything else like that. Yasser Arafat makes big concessions. Hey, Israel, we're going to recognize the state. I denounce violence, and you guys have the right to exist with peace and security. Huge. All Yitzhak Rabin did was say, okay, we'll recognize the Palestinian Authority over the Palestinian people, but no sovereignty, no two-state solution, no nothing. Okay, some limited autonomy. So I would argue that the Palestinians came in way better faith because
that limited autonomy was massive.
Hold on.
They had zero autonomy up to that point. That was the big concession. That was a huge deal.
Let me finish my point. So they go ahead and they make this agreement, right? Then Yitzhak Rabin gets killed like a year later. So his successor comes in, takes everything away, sabotages the Oslo Accords. Palestinian Authority is a shell of itself. It's basically being used as a collaborator force for the Shin Bet, etc. So look, he came in wanting to work with Yitzhak Rabin, and then that same government kills him. What are you going to do if you're Yasser Arafat? The guy that you did a deal with literally gets killed by the other party. Are you going to do diplomacy? No, of course there's going to be an intifada because they didn't negotiate in good faith. They killed him. They killed him, dude. What? It's not like we just ended up at an intifada for no reason. There was a reason why there was an intifada. They killed the negotiator, which Israel always does. They always kill the negotiators. They kill Ismail Haniyeh. They try to bomb Qatar. Right? They've killed so many negotiators. They always do this.
Haniyeh is our negotiator, the head of Hamas?
He was the head negotiator in the political wing when they killed him.
Yeah, the Politburo, which is the head of Hamas. Yeah. Ismail was not killed because he was negotiator. He had no desire to negotiate anything. Okay.
Bro, are you serious? You're going to say Ismail Haniyeh was not the head negotiator?
He was the head of the political party. He was the head of Hamas.
He was the head of the political party, and he was the head negotiator when they killed him.
Yeah, because he was the head of the government that they were fighting with. Yes.
He was the head of the political wing and the head negotiator.
Yes, he was the leader of the group that they were fighting with. Yes.
So Israel does this all the time. They assassinate people that they're negotiating with, or they start wars when they're negotiating.
There was no negotiating. What do you mean? Ismail Haniyeh was not going to negotiate with a peace with Israel. What do you mean?
Bro, they had already done hostage exchanges at this point with Ismail Haniyeh.
Should we get back to that? Should we go to that soon? Should we just go back to the Oslo Accords first?
Oslo Accords, I think we're done. We're going to move on to the Camp David, right? The 2000, because he's not going to go into the Oslo Accords. My argument is. And that's fine.
I'll just ask you a quick question before we move.
Sure. I mean, Oslo 2 happened under Netanyahu, right? So for sabotaging, and the redeployment of Hebron also happened under Netanyahu as well, I'm pretty sure. So it's kind of weird that he, quote unquote, wanted to sabotage and destroy the Oslo Accords, but he was still forced to work
on camera.
Yes, he doesn't like it. Yes. I don't know why you guys listen to, you believe it when they say that, and you say that that's the whole thing, but you will ignore Arab leaders when Nasser, before the 6-day war, literally said that it would be a war of utter destruction for every single Jew in Israel. I don't know why you believe some people, like, yeah, politicians talk and they talk shit. Like, it happens. Yeah. Netanyahu absolutely wants to see every single, if Netanyahu could push a button and expel every single Palestinian from the West Bank and the Gaza Strip, he would do it 100%. No shit,
that
obviously.
Was my point.
No, that's not your point. Your point is that you think that in Israel politics is magical.
Obstacle.
Yeah, there are obstacles. You've got foreign obstacles. Now there are no foreign obstacles because Donald Trump is a massive Israeli dick suck. And then you've got domestic obstacles. And right now, doesn't seem like there's many domestic obstacles because Netanyahu's gotten lucky a lot with military shit recently. But the idea that just because an Israeli leader says they would do something means it's inevitable is not true. Netanyahu did not want to see an expansion of the Oslo Accords, but political forces, Israel still kind of thought that peace was a chance. The Palestinians still kind of sort of thought that peace was a chance. And that's why Oslo came about. That's why the redeployment in Hebron happened, where most of the city was turned over to Arabs, which it is to this day. It's still like 80-20 split, Arabs and Jews. So no, I mean, this idea that just because Netanyahu wanted something, he could speak it into existence is not true. He lost his elections afterwards when Ehud Barak came in, and he tried to do peace as well. And it was the failure of Ehud Barak doing peace, and then it was the subsequent failure of Arafat to agree to any actual terms after the failures of Camp David, after the unwillingness to accept the Clinton parameters, after the Taba Summit's disastrous thing, because Arafat always wanted to wait till the next day and wait till the next prime minister and wait for the next assassination, and wait for whatever. And then when the second intifada happens and he's chilling in fucking, what is he, in his mansion in fucking Ramallah, just watching the violence erupt, they do nothing to push for peace ever. And then eventually he fucking dies of AIDS or whatever the fuck happened to him. And then here we are today. And then after the second intifada, Israel's like, well, fuck this. We're never doing peace, I guess. Because you've got fucking videos of Arabs in Ramallah tearing a fucking Israeli dude's head off and holding it out of a fucking window. Like, yeah, no shit, that shit is fucked at that point. I'm just saying that if you want, you can find an infinite number of excuses on both sides for who sabotaged peace. But the reality is, when push came to shove, there was good faith Israeli negotiation and delegation at Camp David and at the Taba Summit, and it was Arafat who literally drew the ire of the rest of the Arab world. Bandar, the ambassador from fucking Saudi Arabia, there's a whole fucking 2-hour talk on this. Everybody in the Arab world looked at Arafat like he was fucking crazy. That this guy wouldn't accept what would have basically been a normalization of the 67 borders and some final negotiation on the Palestinian refugee issue and on what would happen with East Jerusalem. And Arafat flew around in a fucking plane for 2 weeks, ignoring everything until Ehud Barak was basically lost his next election. And he was like, oh, well, let's see what the next guy wants. And that's been the story of the Palestinians ever since. That's exactly what happened. With no conspiracies and no random shit. That's what happened.
That's fine. We'll talk about Ehud Barak right now because a lot of that was not true. And then going back to what you said about, here's the difference with Netanyahu, right? When you said that Nasser said that we're going to destroy them or blah, blah, blah. Here's the big difference. When these Arabs said the things that they said it in public in front of everybody. What I'm talking about with Ben Gurion saying that he's never going to agree, he's going to always expand and create a state of Israel and go ahead and take all the Arab land. He did that in private. And when Benjamin Netanyahu, when he said what he said, and the West Bank saying that I sabotaged the Oslo Accords and they'll never have two states.
Ben Gurion was saying that wasn't just private. That was to shore up his political. Okay.
Let me finish what I'm saying. Okay. The difference is this. He said this to his son, not expecting those letters to become public. And then Netanyahu said that stuff to those people in the West Bank, not expecting that to be public. So what they say in private is what they really want. The politicians, you're talking about Nasser saying, oh, they're going to destroy them. They're going to destroy them. That's fine. That's political posturing. He's saying it in front of everybody that it is what it is. But what these guys said in private was their real intention. So I believe them because that's what they said in private, not expecting to be recorded. So that's different. And then also with the 6-Day War, remember,
why would they do Oslo 1 at all then?
Israeli started that war.
Why did they do Oslo 1 at all then?
Because he didn't think that Yitzhak Rabin would be assassinated by a Likud party member? He couldn't foresee that?
No, why did Israel Israel agree? If Israel always just wanted to expand and always wanted to take all the territory, why would they even do Oslo 1?
Well, I'm referring to Benjamin Netanyahu and Ben Gurion in particular.
So then the other half of Israel doesn't want to do it? So it's just some Israeli leadership that wants to expand and not the other part of Israeli leadership?
Well, I know for a fact Ben Gurion and Netanyahu, we know what they said to their private counterparts.
So you believe that Rabin and Barak, they legitimately did want peace with Palestinians, then why didn't the peace happen if Arafat was there negotiating the other end the whole time?
Here's the thing. I don't have access to their private stuff, so I don't know. But what I will say with Yitzhak Rabin is he came the closest to actually doing something, even though he didn't concede barely anything, and they killed him for even conceding a little bit.
But there was no deal to concede to. Arafat didn't lay out anything ever in particular that he wanted for any final agreement. He was always happy to kick the can down the road.
The plan was always a two-state solution and rights of self-determination.
No, that's not always the plan. That's not true. Even the majority of people, I don't know today, but historically don't even agree on wanting a two-state solution. That's like a Western concept of a plan.
That's why Clinton was facilitating it. Yes, you're right. It is a Western plan. That's why Clinton was in the middle of brokering the Oslo Accords. It was Clinton's idea to bring them together and do this. Now, with that said, whether it's a two-state solution or a one-state solution, the point is this: what Arafat wanted was a Palestinian sovereignty and rights of self-determination. That's the bottom line. And I would argue
an infinite
that
right of return to Israel proper, infinite right of return for all millions of refugees.
That never got put on paper, so we don't know. We don't know.
That's my argument. Nothing got put on paper with Arafat. Nothing was put on paper. You can't point to a deal
because the Israelis would not agree to that, dude.
So he didn't put it on paper to show them rejecting it? Why would you not do that?
Because again, the Israelis had all the leverage, they had all the power. Clinton brought them together so they can go ahead and make some kind of peace.
No, you put something on paper so that you can go to the international community and go, "Hey, this is what we would accept," and Israel turned it down. What do you mean? The
Israelis never accept anything in the international community. They break international law every single day, bro. They
literally did. They accepted Resolution 181. They accepted the petition. You're going to say it's unfair. That's fine. But Israel will accept things. You're just saying that they're doing it in bad faith, but we can't ever prove that because Arabs are always constantly ready to make war with them regardless. So,
I proved the bad faith with Ben Gurion's letters and Netanyahu.
That's not proving it. That's trying to establish a counterfactual that there's no possible way. Show me the Arab letters. By the way, you can't because none of their archives are even available for us to go through. I can't go through Cairo's archives to see, what that leadership was talking about. I can't go through Syrian Damascus fucking archives or fucking archives in Beirut or archives in what the fuck is the name of the Jordanian capital?
I can't
even visit. Well, no, wait, hold on. But I'm just saying that you're going through and you're cherry picking single lines, single statements or whatever out of Ben Gurion to try to prove that the whole Jewish project was going to be a massive backstab. Even though Ben Gurion didn't even know he would have been the first prime minister, even though Ben Gurion would have no idea how politically successful he'd be in the future, and even though by your own words somebody like Rabin could exist who would genuinely want peace with the Arabs, so that disproves it right there that Israel would have always been on some expansionist pathway. Meanwhile, on the Arab side, there is no deal on the table that Israel has walked away from. There are deals that Arafat walked away from.
Okay, so again, we're talking about a huge time span. You're going from Ben Gurion, the first prime minister.
Because you brought up Ben Gurion quote. You brought that up.
No,
that's why we're back there.
Because I'm saying that there were prime ministers that were in power that obviously had no intention of ever giving the Palestinians anything. And we have proof of this with Netanyahu and with Ben Gurion. I don't have proof for Yitzhak Rabin not wanting to do any type of peace.
But the Jews accepted 181. That's what they did. They accepted 181, right? They did accept it, right? You're saying they would have accepted in the future, but they did accept it, right?
You're talking about the Oslo Accords?
No. In 47, 48, they accepted Resolution 181. They would have accepted that partition plan.
That partition plan I told you before. Well, again, Ben Gurion was in power during that time.
And he would have accepted, the Jews accepted that partition plan. It was the Arabs that refused it. You can say it was unfair or whatever, that's fine.
But it was unfair.
Okay, that's fine. Unfair. But the Jews accepted it. And the Arabs didn't. And the Arabs didn't put a counter proposal. The Arabs didn't counter with anything because despite what you guys want to say in the West now, there was zero place for any kind of Jewish state in that land. It's not like they said, hold on, well, 55%, I know they're going to say it's 100%, 55% is unfair. We want it to be 22%. No, there was 0% would have been acceptable. That's why there was no counter proposal ever. And that's why on the heels of 181, when that proposal was issued and the Jews accepted it, the Palestinians went to war immediately. They were like, fuck this, civil war, we're kicking them all out. If they would have won that war, they wouldn't have left them with Jaffa, or they wouldn't have left them with, 10% or 1% or whatever. They would have expelled all of them.
Well, the thing is, again, is that at the end of the day, they came in, they were killing them, they were stealing their land, they were doing a whole bunch of bullshit, and then they said, oh yeah, let's go ahead and negotiate. What if somebody came to your house and took 50% and said, yeah, let's negotiate? You'd be like, no, get the fuck out. And
what if they wanted 50% after the bank repos my house because I failed to pay my mortgage? Well, at that point, it's not really my house anymore. The Arabs that lived in the Levant didn't own that. It was the Ottoman Empire territory, and the Ottoman Empire had collapsed after World War I. It wasn't all their territory. They didn't buy it. They never paid for it. They didn't have any deeds showing ownership of it. Well, it was AFK landowners. The Israelis did buy that land. That's where they moved people there.
No, they only own 6%. They only own 6%.
And the Arabs only had deeds to show for like 10 or 11%.
Well, they still own more, even if we're going to go
That's fine, but they didn't own the 100% or whatever that you seem to think that they did, or the 85%.
Well, they were there first. They were there first, Destiny. These colonial guys came from Eastern Europe. It's that simple.
They were there.
It was their house.
They lost the war. They lost. Like if they would have invaded and like the territories of the prior caliphates expanded and receded depending upon how their conquest was going. That's how it worked. And they lost the war. They lost that country. Their rights to the land belonged to the British. It was the British mandate for Palestine, and it was up to the British to decide what they wanted to do with it. They made promises to the Jews. The Arabs lived there too. Like
remember the debate is. It's not about who won the war, who lost the war. I'm not disputing the fact that they lost the war. I'm saying that the Israelis are a bigger obstacle to peace because they gave a bullshit plan, right? Expecting that the Palestinians would take it when they were just a minority and only own 6% of the land. Why the hell would you agree to something like that?
Then you don't have to agree, but that means you're not that you're still the obstacle to peace then. Put a counterproposal. This is the thing that hurts the Arabs the most, the Palestinians the most, is there's not a single time in all of history. I can at least point to bullshit Jewish plans and say, oh, well, look, the Jews would have at least accepted that, even though it's bullshit. The Palestinians cannot point to a single plan where they go, look, we were going to accept that. Look, we wanted to do that.
I told you Oslo was the closest. Oslo was the closest.
Oslo's not a peace plan. It was a framework to move them in that direction. But there are no peace plans that the Jews walked away from that were left on the table by the Palestinians because the Palestinians were always under the delusion that they could expel every single Jew, and they could never do it. And by the time they lost like their 12th war, they were like, okay, well, can we go back to like the agreement we had on our 5th war and then go back to that? But by then you're fucked.
Dude, the Israelis are such an obstacle to peace that the Oslo Accords, which was the closest thing, a framework, again, I agree with you. It was a framework towards some type of peace. The Israelis are such an obstacle, they killed one of their own to stop the fucking peace deal.
You say they killed one of their own. Hafez in Syria was worried about being assassinated by one of his own. That's why they didn't even make peace with Israel forever, because they were worried about killing by their own. Sadat had already been killed by their own. The king of Jordan had been killed by a Palestinian in Jerusalem after they.
We're not talking about these countries. We're talking about Israel.
Arafat was worried about being killed by one of his own as well. All of these people were worried about being killed by one of their own. It's a fucking hectic region. If you start making peace with your enemies, everybody's worried about getting killed.
Sure, but here's the difference. Israel claims to be a democracy, to be the only democracy.
Yes, and that's why you have leaders like Rabin who died because they made that sacrifice for peace. Ehud Barak knew that he faced the same risk, and he was worried about getting assassinated too. Rabin made that risk. He made that sacrifice, and he died. You can say that, but
we'll talk about.
Okay, that was a bullshit deal. But then when I ask you, well, what was the good deal that Arafat left on the table? You have nothing. There's nothing you can point to. There's nothing at all. Nothing.
I just told you. I told you. Okay, again, let's go through this.
No. So what was the deal that Arafat left on the table?
He recognized them as Israelis. He recognized them.
This is the part of the Oslo One. He didn't even denounce violence.
Yes, he did. In Oslo One, he denounced violence.
Yeah, they said it. They said that. But Oslo One was not a. If you want to point to Oslo One as an example, then the Jews accepted that as well. Then now you're equal.
Yeah. But that's my point. Oslo One got sabotaged because the Jews killed their own guy. That's my point.
Oslo Two came after. It wasn't. It wasn't just that.
Right, let's go to camp then. Let's go to Camp David.
Oslo 1 carried on after Rabin's death. But okay.
Yeah, it carried on, but it didn't carry on the way it was supposed to carry on.
There was no supposed to because they wanted to revisit it because that's how Arafat works.
He got killed a year later.
Yeah, and Oslo 2 and the Hebron redeployment happened after Rabin died. It still carried on. There's still a Palestinian Authority to this day. There's still Area A, B, and C to this day. It still exists.
Yeah, but it was never supposed to last that long as a point.
Correct. That's why the second got destroyed. No,
rightfully so.
No, there was no final deal. There was no final deal arranged.
So Camp David.
Yeah.
Okay, so you mentioned a guy named Shlomo Ben-Amin, which I find interesting because he even admitted that deal was bullshit, and he said, I wouldn't have accepted if I was a Palestinian either, and he was one of the negotiators alongside your boy Ehud Barak.
I'm aware. I know this quote. I literally asked this guy about this quote. I'm aware. All he's saying is that they were able to push for a stronger deal at the Taba summit, but the thing that undermines that quote is that at Camp David, he said that the Palestinians were right to walk away from it, but then at Taba summit, where they got even more offered, they walked away from that too. So apparently there was never any strategic mind there, but because nothing, they never accepted anything.
That summit that you're talking about with Clinton, the deals were already cooked at that point. He was trying to save face and get his legacy.
The deals weren't
cooked.
The deals weren't cooked because Arafat was never going to agree to anything, and they had started to realize that. That's where the frustrations were mounting on. Because after Camp David, the Palestinians accepted nothing. There was nothing on the table. He would always give the vaguest, bullshittest answers. They didn't accept the Clinton parameters, even though the Jews did. And then they go to Taba Summit for the last-ditch negotiation, and Arafat's looking at Barak like, haha, you got an election coming up, motherfucker. And then just kicked his feet back and chilled. Flew around the world in a jet for a while to the embarrassment of the rest of the Arab world, and then sat back and watched as the second Intifada erupted all over the country of Israel.
All right, let's go through why it was a bullshit deal. Instead of complaining about it, let me go through why they didn't accept that. And even one of the Israelis that you're mentioning here admitted that the Palestinians were right to walk away from it.
From Camp David, not the Taba Summit, Camp David.
I'm talking about Camp David. This was the original deal. So first, Ehud Barak says, "Oh yeah, we're going to give you, we're going to concede with 91% of the West Bank." But the problem is that they didn't use the international community's definition of the West Bank. They gave their own bullshit definition of the West Bank, which didn't cover a bunch of the areas that were important: No Man's Land, East Jerusalem, Red Sea territories, etc. Also, so the deal was cut from the beginning. It wasn't the full 91 like they claimed, because it didn't cover a lot of the settlement areas. Also,
hold on, point by point, just to correct that, it has nothing to do with 91%. Yeah. You're talking about land swaps, okay? And what you're actually talking about is, it's funny, you're using the Jewish mind here, is that they were like, okay, well, they want 91%, 97%, 100%. When they came in, Arafat had no clue what he wanted. The Jews thought it's just some percentage thing, but the reality is what they really needed to negotiate on was what you hit on the second point there, where the holy sites. That was way more important than any type of 91, 95, 97% land swap. But that the holy site thing, the Arafat side never even touched that. They never made any strong claims about what they wanted there. And that was an unanswered question. And a lot of people do point to the lack of specificity around holy sites for why that nothing came from Camp David. Okay.
Yeah. Well, here's the thing. If they can't even negotiate for continuity, right? Continuity in their region where everything is fragmented and they barely have any type of authority, they're not in a position to
continuity
negotiate
has nothing. They would have had continuity. That's an easy thing to do. The continuity was never the big deal.
No, that's huge, because if they don't have continuity, then how are they going to go ahead and be able to establish trade? How are they going to be able to travel properly?
They would have continuity. That's continuity easy.
Everything is fragmented.
It's only fragmented right now because of the relic of Oslo 1 and 2. But the continuity would be given if they actually had a state. The idea behind Oslo 1 was that Area A and B would be fully handed over to them eventually, and then lots of Area C would be handed over to them as well. That was the whole point of Oslo Accords.
And that never happened because the settlements kept expanding, which are illegal, by the way. The whole international community.
It never happened because Oslo 2 died with the Second Intifada. Nothing came from it. Then nobody.
The settlements are illegal, bro. Like, there's no way around that. Everybody knows that. The settlements are 1,000% illegal.
Ask Destiny, Stephen, do you think the settlements are illegal?
I don't think it matters. It's not relevant. The international community's opinion here is not.
Now the international community doesn't matter. We were talking about the UN and the GA all this time, and now international law doesn't matter.
When have I ever wait? When have I ever cited international law as being determinative for any of these deals?
You were talking about we were talking about the Peel Commission. Then we were talking about the
Peel Commission was prior to the existence of the UN, and the Peel Commission wasn't determinative of anything. It was just a finding on what was happening. When you're talking about 67, you're talking about peace or whatever. You yourself just said that Resolution 242 is bullshit. So, and we agree on that, right? And the phrasing was kind of vague. When you talk about peace between Egypt and Jordan and Israel, you agreed. It wasn't the UN that caused it. It was the U.S. paying both sides a lot of fucking money. So yes, the international community is not very relevant when it comes to dealing with peace in this region. It's always because there are leaders in the region that are trying to take big steps to make it, or it's because international pressure from some countries or assistance are the ones that are encouraging them to take it.
The deal was bad. I'm not saying international law is bullshit. I'm saying that the partition plan was bullshit. That particular plan was not fair.
That's fine. I'm just saying that the international law doesn't mean anything to any of the players in this region until they want to wield it as a weapon against somebody else. Fucking Assad and the Houthis in Yemen and the Muslim Brotherhood. These people don't give a fuck about UN international fucking law. None of these people give a fuck. Hamas doesn't care about international law.
Well, I'll tell you this: they break the international law less than the Israelis do, which is kind of crazy because the Israelis are supposed to be democracy.
I don't know. I don't even know how you would. I seriously don't. I don't believe.
They're the occupying force. The occupying force, they're held to a way higher standard.
You think that Israel? Wait, you think Israel breaks international law more than Assad did in Syria? More than Hezbollah does in Lebanon? More than the Houthis do? Ansarullah in Yemen?
You can make the argument that the Israelis break international law more than these rogue terrorist organizations. Yeah.
Given that the death toll is like 10x or more from all these other regions, then...
Dude, Israel's doing a genocide right now as we speak. They're doing a genocide right now.
Yeah, because Arabs can't genocide other Arabs. Because Arabs don't genocide other Arabs. It's never considered that way. There's not enough votes in the UN to ever say that there's a genocide going on amongst any of these other Arabs, Arab on Arab violence. It's just not considered. But I mean, yeah, if you want to call it a genocide, that's fine. More children died in Yemen than like total Palestinians have died. More children died of starvation in Yemen than more children have fucking died in the entire Israeli-Gaza war. Like in Sudan, it's like 500,000 people dead. In fucking Syria, it was like 500,000 people dead. The Iraq-Iran war saw 1 million people dead. Like, yeah, there's a ton of death that happens. That's great if we want to like throw around international law here, but it's not solving anything, right? With 242 came in 67, and we're not any closer to a fucking solution, right?
Here's the thing. I've a million times shit on the Gulf states. I talked about Sudan, all this other stuff where we have all these conflicts in the Middle East, and obviously the Gulf states not helping and or contributing to it. But the reality is that there is a genocide being done right now by the Israelis on the people in Gaza. We can sit here and deflect and be like, well, look at the rest of the Arab world. That's fine. I totally acknowledge that. But the reality is that we have a full-fledged genocide going on right now. But the Israelis are supposed to be the most moral army. They're supposed to be, and they're the occupiers. So obviously they're held to a higher standard. So
why doesn't Hamas just release the hostages then?
Okay, sure. We can go ahead and discuss that because that's a whole other.
Let's just move to current.
I just want to hear that because that would immediately take the wind out of the sails of any kind of moral authority Israel has to continue the war. Why wouldn't Hamas just release the hostages? Say, "Oh, fuck us. We're not winning this. Like, we're just release the hostages."
Okay, so are we going to do this or Camp David? Because this is going to go into a whole other thing. If I go
We can
into this
do.
Hamas
I'm
thing.
just curious to hear your answer to this, and then we can go back to Camp David.
Well, if I answer this, I know you're not going to you're going to want to keep going. I
shit.
promise we'll
Okay,
come to this.
go
We'll
back
come
to Camp
this.
David
Yeah.
then. Okay.
All right, let me just go through Camp David, right? So, also the Camp David Accords, of course, it allowed them to keep the best land that was fertile. They had the strategic high ground, key waterways. Israel would control the border with Jordan, which obviously would undermine their ability to have some sovereignty or do any type of economic trade. Also, they were demilitarized, as we know, no military whatsoever, still occupied. They would have a lightly armed police force. But we know that's not nothing. And then obviously the Israelis would control everything else. And also another important thing is, according to international law, I know you say you don't care about international law, but transferring civilians to occupied territory is illegal under 49 of the Geneva Convention. So even with Ehud Barak's deal here, he was still violating international law. So this deal was complete bullshit. And then I know you're going to want to mention the whole Clinton thing. The Clinton situation, the Clinton summit was basically like, hey, I'm trying to come in and save my own legacy, but he didn't really consult with the Israelis or the Palestinians whatsoever, because at that point it was already, shit head to bed with the Intifada and everything. So,
well, no,
whatever.
the Clinton parameters are before the Intifada, the second Intifada. The Clinton parameters were an attempt to save Camp David because no final agreement was reached with Camp David, and then the Clinton parameters rolled into the Taba summit back and forth. But I think Arafat saw the time ticking on Ehud Barak's prime ministership, and then flew around a jet all day and waited to run the clock out on his. It didn't.
The deal sucked. I mean, I read it out for you. Like, they had it was fragmented territory.
You keep saying fragmented because I know the maps you've seen, but that's just not true. It wouldn't have been fragmented. It would have been contiguous land. In your mind, you're thinking of like some Area A versus BC land. The final deal that they would have made, would have had not only would it have been contiguous territory in the West Bank, they would have had a highway that was supposed to have been built between the West Bank and the Gaza Strip. Like, it literally would have been.
It's not contiguous at all. And then on top of that, settlers get certain roads that Palestinians don't. Palestinians got to go through checkpoints.
You're talking about the Oslo Accords right now. That's not what it would have been like afterwards.
But the Oslo Accords were still in effect when they brought this Camp David bullshit in.
No, the Camp David was supposed to supersede the Oslo Accords. It would have been
it didn't
because they never agreed to anything.
Yeah, but the Oslo was in point.
Hold on, we can't. This is a quick thing, I guess, for the audience or whatever. Like, this is what the map would have looked like. The idea that there was no contiguous offer is just not true. There would have been contiguous land. It would have basically solidified Area A, B, and most of, I think, Area C for the Palestinians.
And the settlements were expanding the whole time. They had 60% of the West Bank pretty much with these illegal settlements, and they kept expanding. And on top of that, these settlers are starting fights all the time, beating up on Palestinians, stealing their land.
The vast majority of the settlements are near the Green Line. The vast majority of settlers live near Israel, basically. Like, Palestinians themselves wouldn't care to trade away like most of this land on the fringes, because you wouldn't even have to trade that big of a percentage. The big disagreements would have been over what to do with East Jerusalem.
The settlements are on the best land, bro.
They're not. The best land doesn't matter anymore. People aren't out here farming corn. That's not irrelevant. Right now, the relevant disagreements are Holy Lands. You can laugh. Okay, but so here you go. So you can laugh. And then here's the ultimate destroyer to your point. What did Arafat offer? What did he say he was going to accept? You have nothing. You have nothing. You lose on this point every single time. You would never be able to give me a counter offer by Arafat because he never wanted to accept anything. And you can say, well, this deal wasn't good enough. They didn't like that. Really? Show me that Arafat's word. Show me that Arafat's word.
I wouldn't take it either.
So what would he have taken? Exactly nothing. You have no idea because he wouldn't. He wanted to fight forever.
Even the Israeli Shlomo himself said, I wouldn't take this deal either.
That was in reference to Camp David. Really? That was in reference to Camp David.
Yeah, Camp David was bullshit.
Yeah, but then Taba Summit came after, and he walked away from Taba Summit as well. It was an expansion. No, that was even more concessions made by Israel. They had, I think by the end of Camp David, they got to like 91.
Hold on. Those concessions you're talking about were from Clinton, not from the Israelis.
No, they were from the Israelis. The Clinton parameters were a set of 6 parameters that both sides were basically supposed to sign on to in agreements to do negotiations. The Israeli delegation accepted basically all of them. And
Clinton gave that on his way out to look cool and say that he was a peacemaker for his legacy. The Israelis and both parties are off on this one. The Israelis and the Palestinians weren't involved in that whatsoever. That's
not true. The Israeli delegation accepted the Clinton parameters, and Arafat basically walked away from them. And then they went to Taba Summit, and Arafat again walked away without agreeing to anything.
The Israelis did not accept that Clinton parameters. They did not. They did not.
Okay.
They did not.
All right.
They definitely did not.
They definitely did. But
they did not. And honestly, even if they did, it doesn't matter because it was a bullshit deal anyway.
Yeah, every deal is a bullshit deal to the Palestinians. I'm seeing a trend here. All of the deals are bullshit. There's no deal on the table.
What about Oslo Accords came close?
What about Olmert in 2008? Olmert offered more than had ever been offered even at Taba Summit, and Abu Mazen or Mahmoud Abbas walked away from that as well. And he didn't respond until 2010, claiming that he didn't know what the deal would look like. And again, because he saw the writing on the wall for Omer getting kicked out too. Like there's never a deal that the Palestinians will accept.
I told you, Oslo came the closest, and they killed the guy that was the head negotiator.
Oslo didn't come the closest. Oslo was not a final agreement. Oslo was just a framework. Yeah, they are still in. They're locked in Oslo today.
It was the best framework.
It was the
best framework. Number one, it was the best framework. And if Yitzhak Rabin had lived, who knows how far we could have gone? We don't know, because Yitzhak Rabin got assassinated, and then Netanyahu came in and sabotaged Oslo's. That's the point.
What final issues would, on the final issues, not just the framework, the actual final issues on refugees, the capital, the borders, what of those would Yasser Arafat have agreed to?
With the whole situation, with the borders, and what else?
What deal would he have agreed to? Yeah,
he agreed to the Oslo.
The Oslo. That's not final state issues. The final status issues was only discussed later on.
Okay, but here's the problem, right? Here's the thing that the Israelis do. They start up they enter an agreement, and they say, oh yeah, we can revisit it. But what they do in the meantime is they expand the settlements, they take more land, they kill more people. They've been doing this forever. It's always in the Israelis' interest to extend it and have things going on, because they have this stupid term where reality on the ground. So what they do is they purposely push things back so that the reality on the ground can be more in their favor, so that when they come back and do negotiate, oh yeah, by the way, we expand little settlements, etc. They've been doing this for decades. The Oslo framework was the best framework, even though it wasn't even that great, because the Palestinians had conceded quite a bit in the Oslo Accords. But the Israelis don't want peace that bad, where they killed their own fucking prime minister. Do you guys understand how insane that is? They killed their own prime minister because he gave an inch to recognize the Palestinian Authority?
There's radicals in every country relating to this issue.
Oh, now there's radicals in every... But that's my point.
Wait, why are you being ironic there? Hold on. What do you think that you just said that contradicts anything I said? You don't think I think there aren't radical Israelis?
No, I didn't say you're not. That there's not radical Israelis.
Are you saying there aren't radical Palestinians or aren't radical Egyptians?
Of course there are.
Okay, so what do you mean? Like, oh, there are radicals everywhere. The person that killed, yes, there are radicals in all. Yes.
Because remember what the debate was, Destiny. The debate was, who is the bigger obstacle to peace? I argue it's the Israelis, and I gave my case on that. Let's start with.
In my case, it's just that there have been Israeli leaders, you yourself said it, that were willing to be assassinated or make huge political sacrifices to look for peace. Rabin was assassinated for his peace deal. Ehud Barak lost his election, off of his failed peace, basically. And there is no peace deal on the table that we can look to from Arafat that Israel walked away from.
Epstein. He was messing around with Epstein. I don't know, but Ehud Barak. But look. The point is, okay, let me give my, can I give my summary, and then we'll go into the conflict with October 7th, because that's a whole other thing. All right, so here's my summary, okay? Let's start with the Peel Commission. Peel Commission was basically Ben-Gurion's way of getting into the international scene and say, look, even though we're colonists that are coming in here and it's not our land, etc. Look, we want to go ahead and make some peace, even though we got these labor communities taking up all the land and fighting with the Palestinians and kicking them out, not letting them do what they got to do. But you know what? Let's go ahead and do some kind of peace. 20% of the land, let us get it, even though it's the best land. Obviously, the Palestinians didn't want to agree to that, right? And that led to some conflicts. Then we find out that your boy, Ben-Gurion, never had an intention of actually having peace. His intention the whole time was to always take the land. This got personified once again with the 1947 partition plan, where he went ahead and said, okay, well, we're going to agree to 56% of the land. And then even though we're less than 1/3 of the population, 56% of the land, we only own about 6 to 70% legally. But yeah, let's go ahead and do this. And then we're going to overrule the Palestinians that are in our territory. No, they didn't agree to that. Obviously, a war breaks out. After that war breaks out in 1948, which, by the way, Irgun, Haganah, Stern Gang, all these militia groups, these terrorist groups, were created in the meantime after 1937 to create the State of Israel. State of Israel is created, war ensues, etc. Then we get it fast forward into 1967. Israel starts the war because they think they're going to be invaded. They win the war, but obviously they go ahead and write the 242. Would deal with that one, where they don't go. They're not descriptive with the territories. They write territories. They don't acknowledge the Palestinians whatsoever, or the refugees, or the right of return. And obviously, this was written in a way deceptively to basically allow them to have more time. During the meantime, they're procuring a nuclear weapon, which again adds to my argument that they never had peace in the first place. They held on to the territories, to some of it, which they still hold on to today. Then you fast forward to 1978 with the Camp David Accords. That had nothing to do with the Palestinians. The Palestinians were not talked about whatsoever in the Camp David Accords. It was just a peace deal between Sadat and Menachem, who's also a terrorist himself, leader of like the Irgun or the Haganah. And then he ended up, they negotiate this agreement. They get the Sinai Peninsula back. The Egyptians do become an ally. and didn't deal with the Palestinian question whatsoever. And the reason why I keep mentioning that the Palestinians aren't mentioned is because until the Palestinians have some type of sovereignty, or there's a two-state or a one-state where they get the right to determination, is there going to be peace. So that is my basis as to why I'm making the argument that Israelis, they're the biggest obstacle to peace because they never want to answer the Palestinian question. Yes, they'll negotiate with the Egyptians here. They'll negotiate with the Jordanians here, but they don't answer the Palestinian question, which is the root cause of all these problems. Then you fast forward to the Oslo Accords. Yasser Arafat agrees to recognize Israel as a state, denounce violence, and then say that they, deserve to exist in security and peace, and Israel has a right to exist, which was a huge concession from a Palestinian perspective, because they had said, "Oh, we're never going to do peace with these guys." Yasser Arafat, Yitzhak Rabin, all he does is, "Hey, we're going to recognize the Palestinian authorities that represent the Palestinians." Though that was a minor concession, in my opinion, based on what Yasser Arafat gave. Dusty might disagree with me. That's fine. Yitzhak Rabin tragically gets assassinated a year later, and that kills the Oslo Accords. And the person that killed Yitzhak Rabin, and this is very important, was a member of the Likud party. Who runs the Likud party? Benjamin Netanyahu. Yitzhak Rabin's wife writes a book, says that she thinks that Netanyahu is the one that killed her husband. Yitzhak Rabin, Netanyahu takes power over after that, and he sabotaged the Oslo Accords, as admitted multiple times in the West Bank recorded footage where he said this secretly. And then on top of that, he said it many times, we're not going to have a Palestinian state. He did everything in his power to sabotage it, to include using Jewish American neocons like Douglas Pearl and like Richard Pearl and Douglas Feith, all these other guys, to write the clean break memo, how they can go ahead and strategize on how they're going to take over the Middle East. So once again, not negotiating good peace, not wanting peace, procuring a nuclear weapon, writing up papers to start the war on terror, which we're going to get into here next. Then you get into the Camp David Accords, which were bullshit as well, because the West Bank territories that they were talking about giving over were all fragmented. There was no contiguity whatsoever. The Palestinians had no ability to trade with the Jordanians. They had no sovereignty. They had a little shitty police force. But they were still being occupied by the Israelis. According to international law, they're still being occupied. And on top of that, the Ehud Barak, the deal that he made, literally was illegal and a war crime, because he was saying, "Oh yeah, we can move civilians into an occupied territory." What the fuck? Like, how's that going to work? So yes, of course, Yasser Arafat declined it. And then when that deal didn't work, and Intifada happens, but Clinton is trying to save his legacy. He tries to go ahead and write the Clinton parameters, which would, in theory, give the Palestinians a little bit more land. But the reality is it never worked out, because the sovereignty was what they wanted, the right of self-determination, which the Israelis took from them because they were occupying them in the West Bank. So that's up until the year 2000, and we can go from there. That's you give your sum.
Are you doing like a summary on the entirety of the
I gave a quick summary on my thing, and then we'll go into October 7th, because I know that's going to be its own thing.
Okay, yeah. The way that this conflict works is you talk to the radical Zionists, which I've debated before, you talk to the radical pro-Palestinians, which I've debated before, and all they do is they give like a total one-sided telling of their history. And if you give a one-sided telling of the history, you can basically incentivize an infinite amount of justification to do whatever you want. When it comes to the late 1800s, when it comes to who belongs in Israel, Palestinians are quick to point out that people that are diaspora Jews that might have come from Eastern Europe or that might have come from Eastern Russia didn't count. They can't trace their original bloodlines back to the Middle East, which I'm pretty sure most people don't even agree with that today, that most of the people that call themselves Ashkenazi Jews, most of the people that were the Jews that were diaspora Jews around Europe, around Russia, whatever else, like all of these bloodlines a lot of them can be traced back to the same Canaanite people that a lot of the Arabs living there for a long time have. All of the caliphates before that ultimately occupied a lot of this land in MENA, the Middle East, North Africa, displaced people there, subsumed people there, assimilated people there, forced them to change religions, kill people, or whatever the fuck. Doing the historical argument, in my opinion, is a loser, because if you go back far enough, if you want to talk indigenous people, a kingdom of Israel existed there way before any of the Islamic caliphates invaded, even before Islam was even a religion in existence. All of the Jews that initially existed in the Levant, in the Ottoman Empire territory, preceding the collapse of the Ottoman Empire in 1917, where it was purchased land. We can say this like they invaded and they stole it, but that doesn't pass the smell test if you even think about it for 2 seconds. Like there was a Jewish paramilitary group fighting inside the Ottoman Empire territory, displacing Arab farmer. Like, doesn't even make sense. Like, the territory was bought by Jews. Early Jews tried to make Aliyah to the Levant. They failed. They sucked. They didn't have the money and the funding for it. After the Balfour Declaration was secured by Jews in the United Kingdom, which was basically a promise to have some kind of Jewish homeland in the Ottoman Empire should the Ottoman Empire fall. The Ottoman Empire fell post-1917. The mandate for Palestine exists. Jews are still buying up land. They're moving in more farmers. They start to do a whole bunch of fucking agriculture. They start to bring water in from the Northeast or whatever. And then eventually there's conflict that arises there for understandable reasons between the Arabs that live there and between the Jews that are starting to immigrate there. This violence escalates to such points that paramilitary groups are started to be created by Jews because the British police force is no longer able to keep check back with some of the Arab-on-Jew violence there. Some of these people, the Lehi and the Irgun especially, engage in what the Haganah and other people would say was violence, unjustified violence or terrorism against Arab communities. You have some notable events. I think the Haran massacre in 29 was a notable one with a lot of Jewish people being killed by Arabs. I think by 36, there have been multiple white papers written, but by 36 or 37, the Peel Commission comes out, which is the first one that says, okay, like the violence and the disagreements between these two people have escalated so much that we have to separate these motherfuckers because they can't get along anymore. You can go back and you can cherry pick, whatever lines you want, saying that, oh, well, Ben-Gurion said that he was happy to see the Jewish land expand or happy to see that, they could expel Arabs or whatever. Prior to 1920, a lot of Jews spoke more favorably about living together with Arabs. It really just depended on what time period you pick. As the violence increases, though, both sides obviously see each other as increasingly hostile. And the British government finally agreed with that in the late 30s. After the Peel Commission comes out, from 36 to 1940, there's a whole bunch of Arab-on-Jew violence. The Brits basically destroy a lot of the what would become the later Palestinian state. A lot of the Arab elite, a lot of the Arab wealthy people are basically flee Jerusalem and flee the Levant because the Brits kind of fuck them over. And then the Brits clamp down on Jewish immigration, and the Brits say, no more Jews. You guys are fucking around too much. The Jews get mad. They start doing terrorisms from up to around 44. They're especially ass pain because of the Hitler shit happening, and they feel like their people are now getting basically genocided, and they have no place to go to because the Brits curbed all the immigration, so they blame the Brits for it. And then Britain leaves. They say, fuck this completely. In 47, you get your first big UN resolution. Okay, the wars are done. Israel is willing to agree. The Palestinians say, fuck no. They start a huge war against the Israelis. It's kind of harsh at first, but eventually Israel makes a comeback. They win by 48 when they do their formal declaration of independence because the Palestinians won't accept any Jewish people there. Then, after they make their independence declaration, all of the Arab states go to war with Israel with the goal of expelling every Jew off the land. They fail that war, although Egypt manages to take the Gaza Strip. Jordan manages to occupy and then annex the West Bank. From 67, you get the Suez Crisis, I think, in 56, where Israel tries to make good with France and Britain. We didn't talk about this, but they kind of sort of, push a little bit further into the Sinai and towards Cairo.
That's what made them get the nuclear bomb.
Sure. But I mean, Nasser, at the time, there's this whole pan-Arab sentiment where Arabs kind of see themselves as trying to create like a unified state again. They long for a caliphate that's not ruled by disgusting Turks. And Nasser has fancied himself as the leader of the Arab world. And he feels like he's going to come out and be this big dude that's going to fuck around with Israel. And he shuts down the Straits of Tehran. And he says, fuck you. We're not going to let you ship shit and, suck my dick. And eventually Israel goes to war with them with kind of the backing of the French or the British. I think it's Eisenhower. The U.S. basically tells him to fuck off eventually. And then they go home. Nasser, feels like he's king shit. He rules the world. And the whole Arab world thinks he's so cool because he, won against the Israelis. And then he goes and he fucks his whole life up in Yemen and, sacrifices fucking 80% of his troops. And then at the same time keeps talking shit to Israel. Israel basically, calls his bluff, despite the fact that you had this unified, Syrian, Jordanian, and Egyptian front against Israel. Nasser's talking a lot of shit. He expels everybody from the Sinai, all the UN peacekeeping troops that were there from the Suez Crisis, and then does the exact same thing that caused the Suez Crisis to happen, which is close the Straits of Tehran and say, fuck you, try me. And then Israel does that. They bomb the shit out of everything. Jordan tries to counter-invade Israel. They lose fucking miserably. Syria, walks in a circle and dies because who the fuck knows what goes on up there. And then Israel expands their territory in a bunch of different places. Israel does make peace at this point. Myron is correct to point out that Israel doesn't have an interest in making peace with the Palestinians directly because Israel doesn't see itself as being able to make peace with the entire Arab world. Remember, the Palestinian crisis is a newish phenomenon. Nobody thought about a Palestinian state or crisis at the time. Even Resolution 242 doesn't say the Palestinian crisis or whatever. It doesn't call these things out in specific terms.
But it's the root cause for everything is my
It's not
point.
the root cause for everything. That's absolutely not
You don't
correct.
think so?
No, it's a rewriting of history to make the Palestinians seem more legitimate than they actually are. Because nobody was calling for an independent Palestinian state when Jordan occupied the West Bank. Nobody was calling for a Palestinian state.
This is your summary, so I shouldn't have interrupted.
Sure,
I'm sorry.
yeah, that's fine. But nobody was calling for it. But nobody called it an occupation. When Jordan took the West Bank, they just annexed it, made all of them citizens. And then when Egypt took the Gaza Strip, they kind of annexed that, and they did make them citizens. They left those people there because they didn't want to deal with it. After Israel wins their war in 67, they win in 73. They formally make peace with Egypt. Menachem Begin decides that it's impossible to negotiate peace with everybody. Ben-Ami calls this capsule theory, that he engages basically that if he can just isolate the Arab states and engage one-on-one, especially with the U.S., who took a huge interest in backing this, that they can make peace. And so they do initially with Egypt, which is a huge deal because Egypt was the big player in the Middle East kind of at the time. And so, with Sadat's effort, with Jimmy Carter's effort, they make formal peace with them. They give give back the Sinai. And then after the fall of the Soviet Union, it becomes easier to put Jordan on a peace track with Israel. They do that. And then for the most part, Israel as a region has kind of chilled out with everybody except for the Palestinian problem. That problem continues to get worse because the Palestinians, who were initially, earlier referred to as, like the Fedayeen, the fighters that would come from these different Arab states, they saw themselves as having the backing of the entire Arab world, and that basically completely vanished within a few decades to just being backed by extremist Iranian proxies who don't even give a fuck about Palestinians. They just see it as a way to fight against Saudi Arabia, Israel, and the United States. So now the Palestinians, in the peace agreements that Israel tried to reach with the Palestinians, they were in an awkward place because the only representation the Palestinians had were essentially terrorist freedom fighters. Arafat, emerged victorious in some conflict with Israel, I think in 64. I think 67 might have been when the PLO was formally formed, but these were freedom fighters. These were terrorists, Fedayeen, whatever you want to fucking call them, that fought against Israel. Arafat made a name for himself as being a fucking military general, not as a diplomatic leader. If you look at photos of him standing next to it's Clinton and Rabin signing Oslo I, he's literally in his military fatigues. He's in his garb because that's what he fancies himself. Arafat was never the man to make peace with Israel. The Palestinians were never able to choose a leader that would have been able to make peace. There were some Israeli leaders that tried to make, big strides towards peace or big concessions, and they often did so at great political cost or at the cost of their life. Rabin died. Ehud Barak lost, his election. We can point to the fact that Netanyahu was elected to, and he said that he wanted to, fuck over the Oslo Accords or whatever. Netanyahu wasn't a fan of them. Netanyahu was also elected like a couple weeks after I think it was in Jaffa, 2 fucking buses full of people were fucking suicide bombed by Palestinians. I think 40 some people died from this terrorist attack. So yeah, Israel was not too keen on working with the Palestinians, and the Palestinians weren't too keen on working with Israelis. Like, nobody trusted each other in this region. Despite that, Ehud Barak did come back in 2000. He tried to make a deal at Camp David. Arafat accepted nothing. They walked away. Clinton, in a last-ditch effort, put out these 6 parameters. Can you guys agree to it? The Israeli administration largely agreed. There were some things that they had questions on because, like, some of the percentages just mathematically didn't work out. Arafat didn't really agree to anything. He said, "Oh, maybe, I don't know. I'd have to consider like these huge points," and then didn't agree to it. They had a final meeting at Taba Summit. Arafat didn't agree to anything there, and he walked away again, despite the fact that what was on the table was like an amazing deal that would have looked like basically 67 borders and some final negotiation on holy relics, but they never reached an agreement there because Arafat fucked off, hoping that maybe the next prime minister and the next US president would give him a better deal, and it didn't. Spoiler alert, Bush fucking hated everything in the Middle East and reset that completely. And then after the second Intifada, there was basically no hope of any kind of Israeli-Palestinian, negotiation. Everything basically was fucked after that. I think the last large overture that I'm familiar with is Olmert in 2008. Had a big negotiation with Mahmoud Abbas, who would be the later leader of the Palestinian Liberation Organization, and then I think the head of the PA. But the Mahmoud Abbas, also walked away from that deal with Olmert. Olmert went to jail, and then 2 years later, Abbas comes out with this story about, well, it was just a napkin, and I didn't know what would happen. That was bullshit. There was just no desire on the Palestinian side for peace because they always feel like if they keep fighting, they can keep getting more, and that's my take on where we are today.
So. Okay.
Wait, so just before we move on to October 7th, I just want to ask both of you, like, we've been doing it for around 2 hours and 40 minutes. Is there any specific times you want to finish by?
We can do this October 7th modern stuff if you want.
Yeah, I'm cool with that. I was gonna take a quick piss. I just want to hear, Destiny's summary. Look, I think, the audience can decide what they want, whether, they think you made a strong argument for the Arabs being the obstacle to peace or the Palestinians. Versus, I think the Israelis are the big obstacle to peace. I guess, do you want to go first and give your take on what your position's on October 7th, or do you want me to do it?
My position is pretty simple. I think October 7th is probably bad.
Let me piss real quick. Hold on, so I can hear what you guys say. I'm going to take a quick whiz, and then I'll get a thing. And then if anybody got to take a piss break real quick.
Yeah. You having fun?
I popped onto Twitter just now, and I saw one of Myron's fan Twitter account saying, what was it called? Myron takes on Destiny and Jew or something like that.
Based.
And Jew host. Is that how it goes?
That's how it goes.
Oh wow, that's good. Is there any specific time? I thought you were recording something else after this.
Did I say that? I hope not. I don't think so.
No, I thought you. Oh, because I thought you put on your YouTube title. Or was that not?
Oh, it's just other shit.
Okay.
How to play video games.
Separate recording. I thought it was a separate recording. No.
All right. Okay. So before we do October 7th, I want to do a quick, just to make my argument real fast, because my argument again is I think the Israelis are the biggest obstacle to peace in the Middle East. I want to cover real quick the war on terror. So obviously, as you guys know,
we're not going to grant any of this. I don't think there's any, because you're going to clean break memo that Israel instigated everything and got us to fight. But I'm not going to agree with any of that. And this,
that's fine. And you can totally disagree. I don't expect you to agree. I just want to give it out to the audience real quick, because again, my argument is that simply that the Israelis are the bigger obstacle to peace, and I have to deal with the neocon angle and everything else like that. So what I'll say is simply this. Before 9/11 happened, we know that there was a clean break memo, and we also know that there was the paper that came out in September by PNAC as well. The authors of these documents overwhelmingly were Jewish neocons, right? Some of them even have dual citizenship with Israel. And these individuals, like for example, the clean break memo, they wrote it for Benjamin Netanyahu right after he came into office in 1996. In this document, it basically identifies several countries in the Middle East, namely, most importantly, Iraq, and removing Saddam Hussein. Obviously, the PNAC document also talks about this as well. A year later, 9/11 happens, and it literally says in there, oh, we need a Pearl Harbor-like event. So after 9/11 happens, right, we go ahead and identify Osama bin Laden, blah, blah, blah. It is what it is. We don't have to go into conspiracy theories of who was involved, but what I'll do is just talk more about the aftermath. And the aftermath, what ended up happening was they were able to falsely link Mohammed Atta, the lead hijacker, to anthrax when he met with an Iraqi intelligence official, I think in Malaysia or somewhere in Malaysia, and they said that there was an anthrax exchange. This was one of the chief things that the intel community and the neocons and the Bush administration in general utilized to justify a war in Iraq. And then they went ahead and said that there was weapons of mass destruction. Why am I mentioning Israel in all this? The reason why is because the cabinet and the people that wrote a lot of these policy papers were overwhelmingly Jewish neocons, from Paul Wolfowitz over to Bill Kristol to Robert Kagan to, or they were hardcore Zionists like John Bolton, etc. Richard Pearl, Douglas Feith. It was just complete. Judith Miller, who lied about Iraq's weapons of mass destruction. Overwhelmingly Jewish neocons. It is what it is, and a lot of them had an affinity to Israel. Now, with the whole Mohammed Atta and anthrax angle, the reason why this is important is because Israeli intelligence gave us this information, and then Netanyahu famously came in 2002 and said that taking out Saddam will have positive reverberations all across the region. Well, we know what happened after that. We went over there. There were no weapons of mass destruction. 1 million people died. Kids starving. The Middle East completely destabilized. This led to a whole bunch of problems in the region, and this set up the war on terror. Now we can, and I would argue that in itself, because it was Israel that precipitated a lot of this, because we have dual allegiance neocons in America that are running foreign policy for us, and we have a bunch of donors involved. That led to the war on terror, which also is another reason why the Israelis are an obstacle to peace. It created a lot of problems in the Middle East. And then if you want to fast forward, Destiny, I know me and you are not going to agree on any of that, but I just want to give the audience my perspective on that with the war on terror. But if you want to fast forward to October 7th, we could do that too.
Sure. I mean, I would just say in regards to this, I mean, like, Israel had a reason to hate Saddam Hussein. Like, Saddam Hussein Iraq was the first country to actually shoot missiles into Israel, Scud missiles, during the first Gulf War, in an attempt to bring Israel into the war, because they knew that that would break the Arab coalition that the United States had formed for the first Gulf War. Also, to say that they were trying to argue that taking out Saddam Hussein would lead to a more stable Middle East, that's not a hard argument to make after, the first failed invasion into Kuwait, after chemical warfare against Kurdish people in Kurdistan and North Iraq. Like, yeah, I think most people probably would have agreed with that. If Israel was always just going to fabricate some reason to bring the U.S. into war, like some anthrax bullshit, I don't know why they would write a paper on it first. I feel like you just probably wouldn't write the paper and you would just fabricate the reason later on. But it's...
Well, that was the intention the whole time, is my point. And they needed a reason to do it. So it was a plan for years, almost a decade.
Yeah, why write a paper on it, though? Why not just, do the plan? They don't need a paper. That just makes them look guilty as hell.
You're right. It was very stupid, and now we have the evidence. You're correct. They shouldn't have wrote a paper. They should have just done it secretly. But yes, my argument is that the Iraq War had nothing to do with the September 11th attacks. Saddam Hussein and Osama bin Laden hate each other. A lot of people don't know this, that they actually were going to fight each other. The whole reason why Osama hates us is because the Saudi Arabian government didn't allow him to fight Saddam Hussein during the first Desert Storm situation when he invaded Kuwait. So, it is what it is. That's my position on it. I think Israel dragged us into that war. We did not benefit whatsoever from the Iraq War. Only Israel did. And okay, now with October 7th, another reason why I think that the Israelis are an obstacle to peace is with the October 7th conflict. Well, how did we get there? Let's get there first with the Abraham Accords. The Israelis went ahead and recognized, they got the UAE, Bahrain, Sudan, and I think one other country to recognize them with the Abraham Accords. And this is something that Trump actually brokered. So I got to give, I'm very critical of Trump when need be. I know you hate Trump, but here you go. I know you'll enjoy this. The Abraham Accords were absolutely an L when it comes to peace in the Middle East, because all this did was stimulate agitation for the Palestinians, especially Hamas, because with the Abraham Accords, what that basically did was it created the process for which now the Saudi Arabians can join. And Hamas understood that if the Saudi Arabians join the Abraham Accords, it's over, because Saudi Arabia obviously has a significant amount of power and influence in the Arab world. Obviously, from a religious perspective, Medina, Mecca are very religious cities. So if Saudi Arabia had joined, that would have been a big problem. And then also, on top of the Abraham Accords, we also had the issues with recognizing Jerusalem as the capital, moving the embassy. That was obviously symbolic and problematic for the Palestinians. And then lastly, which a lot of people don't talk about, but it is very important as well, is bringing over the heifers and, trying to destroy the Al-Aqsa Mosque to create the temple, which there's a whole temple organization that's doing this. Ben Gvir and these other crazy people have been antagonizing them going up to the Temple Mount with their security. So this is what precipitated and what led to the October 7th attacks. And as a matter of fact, the operation on October 7th was called Al-Aqsa Flood. And the reason for that was because they were planning on destroying the Al-Aqsa Mosque to go ahead and create this Temple Mount on top of the Abraham Accords and everything else without solving the Palestinian question. And this is precisely what I mean when I say, if there is not an answer to the Palestinian question, there's never going to be peace in the Middle East. And Israel keeps trying to kick the can down the road and not deal with the Palestinian problem. Now, October 7th happens. Here's something a lot of people don't know. On October 10th, the Israelis had a chance to get all the hostages back. This is reported in the Israeli Times.
Wait, before we go to the October 7th conspiracy theory. So prior to this, I would actually agree with most of this. I think that at this point, past 2005, I think Israel's appetite for any kind of peaceful arrangement, after seeing all the terrorist attacks and everything else from the Second Intifada, I think Israel's basically done at this point, thinking that Palestinians want to live alongside Israelis in any sort of like good faith manner. So I think that the Israeli side gets pretty radicalized. The Palestinian side remains like pretty fucked and hateful of the Israelis. The Israelis are pretty hateful of the Palestinians. However, the Palestinians have now been basically divorced from every legitimate major backer or country on the planet. The only people that are legitimately backing them are really, you've got Hamas that comes up big post 2005 as the governing body in the Gaza Strip, and then you've got Hezbollah that's starting to exist in greater force in Lebanon in 2006. I think they kind of trash Israel in an attempted little war there. Under the leadership of Nasrallah. And then you've got Iran that's kind of like funneling money over to them. The Houthis kind of sort of take an interest. I think around 2017, 2018, I think Iran starts pumping a little bit more money to them. Houthis don't really give a fuck about what's going on in Gaza, though. They'll just do a little bit for Iranian money, basically. But yeah, this is, at this point, nobody wants to deal with the Palestinian problem. I think Palestinians don't have a genuine solution in mind for peace, and Netanyahu is totally fine to keep kicking the can down the road and solidify basically peace with the rest of the Arab world. I largely agree with that at this point, but I mean, like, this is where we're at, where neither side is. I mean, I would argue for the Palestinian side that they have never accepted any peace agreement. Israel feels like there's not going to be any peace, especially after all the terrorism in the Second Intifada. And now, yeah, this is where we're at. Where both sides are just trying to infinitely fuck the other over. And then we come to October 7th, sure.
Yeah, well, I mean, like, as you know, there is a potential for peace, but, you know, Netanyahu is doing everything in his power to not answer the Palestinian question and sidestepping it, which obviously agitates the problem. And he doesn't want to exercise any type of diplomacy at all. You know, Netanyahu.
The Palestinians aren't even united as a people post 2003, 2004.
And he did that on purpose.
He didn't do that on his own. No, part of that was Hamas winning the election in the Gaza Strip.
He funded Hamas.
No, Netanyahu has never personally funded Hamas. Qatar money was making its way in there prior to October 7th, but after, yeah, of course, because either that or allow the Gaza Strip to collapse, because the PA didn't want money going over to the Gaza Strip because Hamas was the governing body there after they killed all the Fatah people and threw them off buildings and kicked them out. But yeah, Hamas is the government basically in the Gaza Strip post 2005 because the people there felt like they were fighting against Israel better than, you know, Mahmoud Abbas's cucked, you know, Fatah or whatever was existing. I think it was Fatah versus Hamas in the Gaza Strip. And so after Hamas becomes the governing body there, and then the PA and the PLO remain like the governing people in the West Bank, well, now you've got a divided Palestinians, and now it's just infinite conflict with the Gaza Strip, which Netanyahu and a conservative Israel is happy to see, because now they've got a reason to fight against them forever, and they've got a divided Palestinian people, but it's not helping the Palestinian people at all. Like, Hamas is a huge thorn in the side there, but they're okay with being a thorn in the side there because they don't want any final agreement anyway. They want the destruction of all the Jewish people in Israel. That's why they call for global intifada. That's why they shoot rockets randomly at people all the fucking time.
Well, they have the right to resist.
They don't have the right to throw. They don't have the right to launch random rockets into Israel.
They absolutely have the right to resist. I know that sounds fucked up or whatever, but
It's
the
not fucked
reality
up.
is,
It's a fundamental
that
misunderstanding of international law. You're mixing up jus ad bellum versus jus in bello. Like, yes, you are allowed to fight against your occupier, but to say that the Gaza Strip is even occupied is that's a tenuous. It's probably not. Number one, but number two, that doesn't give you the right to take hostages. That's a war crime. It doesn't give you the right to attack civilian populations. That's a war crime. It doesn't give you the right to launch indiscriminate arms against an opposing force that could kill civilians. That's also a war crime. Like, none of the conduct in war is reasonable or allowed by international law. But nobody cares about international law, so yeah.
Yeah, well, yeah, but like the reality is that they are occupied by every means of the measure. They are absolutely occupied.
They're not. The main means of the measure would be a police force that displaces the local police force. That wasn't the case. The second one is like administrative power over the area. Hamas was the administrator, and then there's a third one. But by every measure, Hamas was the government.
Destiny. No, by every measure, Destiny, they're occupied. They don't control their airspace. They don't control their water. They don't control what goes in and what goes out. They have no
That's
sovereignty.
Called a blockade. That's called a blockade.
Yeah, and
you could argue there's a blockade,
means,
but they're not occupied.
And they're absolutely occupied. The West Bank and Gaza have been deemed by the international community as being occupied. They are 100% occupied, which allows them to have the right to resist through it says here by any means.
No, nothing says that in international law. No,
and it does.
I promise it doesn't.
To include armed resistance.
Yes,
and
armed resistance, but that's still, you have to follow all of the other rules of war. It's not armed resistance just killing random civilians.
And here's the other thing too. If we're like, the reality is, who commits more war crimes? I mean, if we're gonna go ahead and have this war crime thing, like, oh well, you can't do this, you can't do that. The Israelis are committing war crimes all the time. You want to talk about hostages? The Israelis have 10,000, 11,000 hostages. A lot of them without any type of charge whatsoever. That's why October 7th happened in the first place. So we have all this agitation going on, right, with Israel now. And then also the other thing too, and I want to talk about the JCPOA too. That was another thing that the Israelis killed. That was another obstacle, once again being an obstacle to peace with the nuclear deal. That's another example. But with whole October 7th thing, so we have all these things that happen with October 7th. That's fine. And the other thing also that's important is that there was a stand down order, and they could have got the hostages back on October 10th. But they chose not to do that.
I don't think there was a stand-down order. That's never been proven. And getting the hostages back, saying that Hamas is willing to give the hostages back if you go away, is the most joke thing in the world. You can't do a huge terrorism, capture 200 people, and then give the 200 people back and end the war. Nobody would ever agree to that ever. That's an insane demand.
That's fair. That's fair. And I knew you were going to say that. But here's the difference, right? So here's the thing. The debate is, who is the bigger obstacle to peace? Israel could have gotten all their hostages back on the 10th. Now, am I saying that what would have happened was for them not invading the Gaza Strip? Now, here's the thing. Normally, I see what you're saying. Hey, well, they conducted a terrorist attack. How dare they do this and then Israel not respond? That would make them look weak. Where's the difference? Israel has a fantastic fucking intelligence service, okay? The Mossad, Shin Bet, Unit 8200, Amman. These guys ran a pager fucking operation for 10 years. They did Operation Rising Line, where they had Mossad assets in the back line in Iran. They have the ability to conduct sophisticated operations where they can easily dismantle Hamas. And here's the other thing too. They did this against Hezbollah and they did this against the IRGC. Two militaries that are superior to Hamas. You telling me that you couldn't run special operations or do some type of intel operation where you have a bunch of collaborators in Gaza Strip and taking them out? I mean, they killed Ismail Haniyeh in Tehran, Iran. So I don't want to hear anything about like, oh, well, they conduct their terrorist attack. Well, here's the thing. Who's the bigger obstacle to peace? I would argue it's the Israelis, because how many people have died because they wanted to go into the Gaza Strip, and they could get the hostages back at any time, because this is what I was going to answer your question before. You asked me, hey, why don't they release the hostages? Here's your answer. They will release the hostages. Here's the problem. Netanyahu does not want to do a final ceasefire, because Hamas will give them the hostages back, but they want a permanent ceasefire and withdrawal of all troops. Israel does not want to do that because they want to occupy the Strip. It's about getting them out of there from the first place.
Sure, so but again, I mean, like, you acknowledge that them keeping hostages, that is a war crime, right?
Sure, but Israel's committing war crimes all the time.
That's fine. Yeah, but I'm saying that's fine. Well, 11, prisoners of war are not necessarily the same as hostages, unless you're counting every single person who's been.
They're there without charge. They're being raped at Destiny. Like they're literally. They're protesting.
But the reality is that, like, war crime. If you're raping prisoners, that is a war crime. Sure. But if you,
and they protest for it, so they can continue to do it.
Sure. If Hamas were to release the hostages, though, the support for Israel doing any kind of war, I think, in the Gaza Strip, at least a while ago, probably would have collapsed internationally, what little support they had. And then domestically, I think there probably would have been major upheaval as well. If all the hostages were released, I think Israel would have a much harder time justifying that war to its citizens.
They would keep fighting, dude. Like, because the reality is,
they'll only fight as long as they have the domestic support for it. But I think the domestic support for that fighting would collapse pretty fast if like all the hostages were released and now you're just on an infinite war in Gaza to remove Hamas.
The United States would continue to support them. Even the UK would continue to support them.
Yeah, Stephen, I don't really think the domestic support will falter if the hostages come back. You've got to remember that the people who are supporting him, Netanyahu's supporters, are not on the far right, but are the people that want Hamas to be destroyed. They want a new age.
Sure, I agree, but you guys have like a crazy coalition government with like fucking 20 different parties that are holding together Netanyahu's majority, right? I think that if all of the hostages are released, there's absolutely a decent chunk of the Israeli population that would want to see a war in Gaza until everything is done. But I think it would be a lot harder. Like Israel, because even today they still keep saying that 20 or 40 hostages left. They still keep citing these hostages as like a reason, and they have to give that as like their moral front. I think internationally and to their own people. I don't know, but maybe today, maybe they could. But I know like 6 months ago, if Hamas would have just released all the hostages, I think Israel would have
been different.
Yeah, I think they would have a really hard time going. I don't know today. I feel like the because they couldn't bring up the hostage thing ever anymore, and now they're just on a war against Hamas, and however many people die, and they can't even put the hostages on the other side as a virtue signal.
Well, here's the thing. Like they never cared about the hostages. That's my point. Is that once again, an obstacle to peace. They could have got the hostages back on the 10th, had them all back safe.
Sure.
Run a special operation.
I don't disagree with this, but both sides wanted the war to happen. Hamas could have just released the hostages in the beginning, and then it would have been really hard for Israel to continue. And Israel could have done more to get the hostages, but Israel's happy for the hostages to be there because they get to fucking go disassemble Hamas as much as they want.
Right. No, because if they gave the hostages up, that would have taken the only leverage they have. Here's the thing.
They have no leverage. No, you're wrong. That's the most absurd belief. You think they have leverage? You think that Hamas has leverage over the Israeli government because they have hostages?
No, they don't. I said it's the only leverage they have.
They have no, it's not leverage. That's, if anything, it's a counter leverage. That's what's giving Israel the cause for war as much as they have. You think Israel, you just said it yourself, that they don't give a fuck about the hostages. I think that they're a very distant second place. Very distant. No, they don't.
They're proving that right now with what's going on.
But Hamas is proving that they wanted the fighting the whole time as well. When they should have known very early on within the first few months, we're fucked. There's no possible way we win this. But they kept those hostages the whole time because they want the conflict to continue.
Well, no. I told you, October 10th, they were willing to give them back. The Israelis said no.
Yeah, of course.
That's a big deal.
Well, yeah, but the Israelis were never gonna. I mean, you can't have somebody do a big terrorisms on you and then agree that they can be a permanent government, and then you just go back to normal. There was no way that was ever going to be accepted. Obviously,
right? But here's the thing: like they have the capability of destroying them from the inside out. We've seen them do it with Hezbollah. They've seen them do it with IRGC.
No,
we haven't do it with the Houthis. What? Dude, did you not see the Patriot attack? You know they had bombs in those Patriots for 10 years?
Yeah, but that's a lot different than disassemble. First of all, no, I don't know. I don't think they had bombs on the Patriots for 10 years.
It was in for 10 years. New York Times reported. You can look it up. 10 years.
Sure.
10 years.
Sure. Okay. Number two, I think taking apart the entirety of Hamas, which is also the government of Gaza, leads to a lot more problems than attacking, the military, part or segment or thing of like Hezbollah, right? Like I think that if Israel would have done a pager attack on Hamas to kill the government figures, the policing, the military, everything else, like the whole Gaza Strip would fucking collapse. And then what do they do after that?
Well, they could do what they're trying to do now, which is basically what the point is. My goal,
What do they do? What do they do after Gaza collapses? If they were to do the same type of huge attack and destroy all of Hamas, the legitimate government of the Gaza Strip, what is Israel supposed to do after that?
They can get another government in there, or do what they always want to do, which is ethnically cleanse. They want ethnically cleanse anyway. Here's the thing. Again, my argument is simply that they are the obstacle to peace. And they could have had peace, but they don't want that peace. They want to destroy the Gaza Strip, get them out of there, and on top of that, start wars with everybody else. They literally started a war with Hezbollah. They went down. They bombed the Houthis.
Been at war with Israel. It's not like they just randomly started that. What do you mean? These guys have been fighting forever. Hezbollah started shooting rockets after October 7th, right?
But they invaded. They did the Patriot attack. They invaded southern Lebanon. They said they were going to make it all the way into Beirut. They didn't do that. Then they went ahead and obviously conducted that attack, and then that set up the stage for Syria to be dethroned and destabilized. And then obviously they did Operation Rising Lion in the middle of peace negotiations. Like, this is a rogue state, dude. Like, they're doing whatever they want. And then they just bombed Qatar last week or 2 weeks ago. Like, they are absolutely the biggest obstacle to peace in the Middle East. Israel is the main antagonizer of almost every modern conflict.
Why do you think that most of the people in the Middle East, say like Syria and Iran and maybe Iraq, generally support Israel? Like Egypt, all the Gulf states?
Because they're cucked by the United States. That's why.
Do you think that if Saudi Arabia, the rest of the Gulf states, and Egypt could choose, who do we want to lead the Middle East going forward? The Ayatollah or the Knesset or Jerusalem or Israel? Who would they choose? Would they choose Iran or would they choose Israel?
Well, preferably they'd want Saudi Arabia to do it.
Saudi Arabia is like, yeah. Wait, let's look to Saudi Arabia. Who would Saudi Arabia rather be partners with, Iran or Israel? Israel. Everybody would choose Israel. This is a country that's fought its way to, yeah.
No, because here's the thing you got to remember. Yes, maybe the politicians might say, you know what? Yeah, politically it'd be easier for us to deal with Israel. But the reality is the people of the land would have a serious problem with that. This is why Saudi Arabia is so scared to recognize Israel, and a lot of these Arab countries are scared because they look at it like, yo, that's like we have our Palestinian brothers over there being killed or whatever. The Muslim world would have a problem with that. So what I think is, and here's the other thing too, a lot of people don't know this, Iran and Saudi Arabia are exercising diplomacy now. They started recognizing each other in 2023. So they've done.
Yeah, they might be on the path to that, but they have a highly contentious history with each other, where Iran has been like directly attacking now, or not now, but I think in Trump's first presidency, they attacked. Yeah, they were attacking Saudi Arabian refineries with fucking drone attacks for the first time ever. I think in 2019.
Yeah, but yes, you're 100%
so they might be
right,
working their way towards like peace now. But like,
no, they already got peace going. So since 2022 or 2023, they've been formalizing negotiations, and they recognize each other. They literally, their militaries do flight simulations together. Like there's peace between the two now. I'm telling you, Israel is the biggest problem in the Middle East, and it is the main antagonizer for all the wars in the Middle East. Because before Israel's creation, we didn't really have a beef in the Middle East like that, dude.
The whole Ottoman Empire. Wait, hold on. The United States wasn't even like enough of a foreign power to do anything in the Middle East. What do you mean?
I would argue we were at the pinnacle of power after World War II.
Yeah, but Israel didn't exist until World War II.
Precisely, and they're the ones that started the problem.
No, but the United States had no. I don't think the United States cared or had anything to do with conflict. Really, with the rest of the world. Even World War I, we were kind of involved with. Prior to that, we were doing our own thing.
I mean, we're involved in World War II, but like Israel has extended the war because if you look at a lot of the modern wars we have now, it's been for the benefit of Israel, especially this war on terror. It's a whole bunch of bullshit. And here's the other thing too I want to say with Iran, right? They always say Iran's the boogeyman and all these other problems, right? The only reason Iran is fighting so hard to get a nuclear bomb now, especially, is because we pushed them to do that because of Israel's reckless foreign policy, where they're bombing Iran, they're attacking Iran all the time. We pulled out the JCPOA. Why do we pull out the JCPOA?
What do you mean? Are you implying that there is no conflict in the Middle East, all the conflict that happened in Yemen with Egypt in the 60s had nothing to do with Israel? The Iraq-Iran war didn't have anything to do with Israel. The Afghanistan civil war I don't think had anything to do with Israel. Turkey and all of their revolution to create themselves as their own state in the late 1910s or whatever, 1920s, had nothing to do with Israel. Like all of the stuff that happens across like northern Africa doesn't have anything to do with Israel. Like all these places were violent in conflict places, especially after the collapse of the Ottoman Empire.
We have an interventionist foreign policy because of Israel, and we have destabilized, assisted, or done coups in so many different places all across the Middle East.
Did Israel make us go to South 100%. America and coup all the countries that were involved in South America as well?
I'm talking about the Middle East. Like,
yeah, but hold on. But if wait, you can't just say they made us do it in the Middle East, and that's the only reason we did it. But we also did it in Taiwan, or not Taiwan. I'm sorry. We did it in Korea. We did it in Vietnam. We've done it in how many countries in South America and Cuba? Like, it seems like we kind of did that everywhere in the Cold War. Everybody was doing that everywhere in the Cold War. The Soviets versus the U.S. No?
Sure, but remember, the debate is who is the bigger obstacle to peace. I'm saying that Israel is a bigger obstacle to peace than Palestine or any of these Arab countries, because Israel's foreign policy is to literally their motto is rise up and kill them first. And then don't forget what Iran.
That's not Israel's I don't even know what that means. Where are you getting that from? Number one.
That is,
what
is
Iran,
one of their mottos.
For Iran,
rise up and kill them first.
Okay, I'm not sure where that comes from, what that means. But for Iran, Iran is also has been fighting with and killing troops in the Middle East as well, post.
No. We okay. Operation Ajax, 1950. What did we do? We got rid of Mogadishu, right? Their democratically elected leader.
What does that have to do with Israel?
Israel was involved with us, the Brits.
No, you're dead wrong. We did that on behalf of the British because the Brits wanted their oil refineries, and because he was going to. I have.
Look it up.
Iran was going. Yes, but that was because Iran was going to nationalize all of their oil refineries, and Britain didn't want to lose their investment there. That was
of course. And the Israelis were involved in helping.
I don't know how they might have been involved in helping. Israel wanted 100%. To help everybody in the West. Yeah, but we did it because of Britain. If Israel didn't exist, we would have still done that same thing.
Well, here's the thing. Yes, we did it to help Britain, but at the same time, we also what was one of the first things that Iran did when the Shah came in after him getting thrown out, or once the Shah came into power, he recognized Israel. I think he was the first country in the Middle East to recognize Israel.
What is that? How does that prove any point?
what I'm trying to say here is that Israel has either been directly involved in or one of the main precipitators of us creating this interventionist foreign policy.
Hold on, wait, are you
all
saying
across the
wait,
Middle
are you
East.
saying that Israel had like some interest that was a great boon to Israel that Iran recognized them as a
100%.
country? No,
100%.
absolutely not. Absolutely
They were the
not.
first country in the Middle East
Who
to recognize them. A
cares?
big
What does
one
it
too that has
matter?
a bunch of energy.
Iran is like
That's
barely
huge.
even considered the Middle East at that point. This was like we're like a non-player in World War II. What do you mean? What was Iran doing in the 40s and 50s? Literally nothing. People are trekking through here. Iran, like there's literally
They had
nothing.
a lot of oil, enough where we had to run a coup. They were a player.
That was not, yeah, but that was not that had nothing to do with Israel. That wasn't helping Israel. Israel's main conflict at that point. If you do history of Israel, you don't hear anything about Iran. Iran is not involved in like fucking any of these conflicts or helping much at all until you get to like 2000s.
Okay. Israel's primary arch nemesis the entire time has always been Iran. Once they got rid of Saddam, they've been fighting like hell to get rid of Iran.
Yeah,
That's
this
why
is like
they've been trying to get us to bomb them.
post-2000s. This is
pulling out
post-2000s. You just said that
Okay.
Iran recognizing Israel was some great help to Israel. Israel's main enemies were Egypt and Syria and
that's
Jordan.
after we destabilized Iran with Operation Ajax, because that was a benefit to the Brits and to the Israelis. Obviously, it benefited multiple people, but again, for
It
us to sit
wasn't
here and not,
Israel wasn't hurt by Iran. It didn't help them at all or hurt them.
it definitely helped them. It was one of the first countries in the region to recognize
That
it. It was
doesn't
the
help
first one actually in the
Israel.
region.
And what did that help with? It didn't help them in the Suez Crisis. It didn't help them in '67 with the Six-Day War. It didn't help them in '73 with Yom Kippur.
No, it definitely did help them to have
Help them
a country
how?
in the
How did it
region
help them?
recognize them.
How did it help them?
Well, for one, since the Brits control their oil, that the Israelis were able to benefit from that because that was the big reason why they even conducted Operation Ajax, because Mogadishu wanted to go ahead and actually nationalize the oil, and the Brits were like, hell no, we want to make a bunch of money. The Israelis benefited from that significantly, right?
For how? From a cash transfer or from?
No, because what ended up happening was Iran became a vassal state for the West, and then Israel benefits from anything that we do that's a vessel of the West. Israel benefits because they're one of our main allies over there.
I don't agree with this, but
You can look at Operation Ajax was conducted by who? The U.S., Brits, and the Israelis. Why? Because there was an enormous benefit to the Israelis.
no,
for
you're
being
dead
involved
wrong.
in
It
that.
wasn't. It was for the Brits. It was to prevent all of their oil companies from being taken over and nationalized by the country. That was the Brits begged the United States to help in that intervention there.
Of course, and then the Israelis assisted as well. But
I don't know what the Israeli
benefited
system
too.
was. Okay.
They-
in that
because
case,
they
so
got-
did France. So did every single country in the West benefited,
We're
I
getting
guess.
slightly off the topic. Should we head back to
And then
the
also, the argument is that the Israelis are one of the biggest obstacles to peace. Another thing, they were heavily involved in us pulling out of the JCPOA, aka the Iran nuclear deal. I think that was a good deal that was going to have Iran be in a position where we can monitor what they're doing. We had inspectors in there. We would stop them from getting a nuclear weapon. Actually, it was to Israel's benefit because Israel would be the only nuclear power in the region. But what did Israel do? Mike Pompeo's a cuck. He went ahead and he's owned by the Jews. He tells Trump, hey, we got to pull out of this thing. Trump pulls out by advice of him. He's the Secretary of State at the time. He puts the IRGC on a terrorist watch list in 2019, and then bam, now the diplomacy that we had worked for multiple years under the Obama administration gone. And then and why was that? Because of enormous pressure from the Israel lobby.
Yeah, I think pulling out of the JCPOA was horrible. The Iranian nuclear deal was bad. I don't think we should have done it. But if Israel has so much control that they were able to make us pull out of that deal, why didn't they have enough control to make us not enter the deal in the first place with Obama?
Because Obama had a spine against the Israelis. But
Then that's not, if they have a spine, if a spine is all it takes, then you have no conspiracy. Then there's no way they can control it. All of you need is a little bit of a spine, and now you can't do anything.
Well-
like you said
well,
before, they were assassinating people like JFK or whatever in order to keep them on board with their nuclear program and shit. And now you're saying that all you need is a spine, and now you can create one of the worst. Well, I think it was a great deal, but Saudi Arabia and Israel both fucking hated it. They felt like they got stabbed in the back by the United States, but fuck them both. I thought that was a great deal. But to say that Obama can resist Israel with just having a spine means that Israel has no power to do anything for U.S. foreign policy.
Well, here's the thing. Like, Netanyahu came to the United States and literally challenged the sitting president of the United States and addressed our house, talking about how the JCPOA was a bad deal. Blah,
Yeah,
blah,
and he
blah.
got cucked. Fuck all came from
it. Yeah, but here's the thing though. Once Trump came in, what happened?
Yeah, because
Boom.
Trump is a cuck, not because he got controlled by Israel. Trump is just a fucking
but-
retard.
No, well, here's the thing. That proves my point that the Trump administration, this is my biggest criticism of Trump. He is owned by the Adelsons. He's owned by the Jews.
I don't think.
So
We can say that. I don't think he's owned. I think he's just retarded. I think he sees an easy conflict and he takes it because he knows that they're always going to win. And old people like Israel. I don't think you need any conspiracy there to explain shit.
I mean, again, Obama stood up to the Jewish lobby more than Trump did. So when Trump came in, one of the first things he did was disband the plan. Got Mike Pompeo in. Pompeo is a hardcore Zionist owned by the Jewish lobby. he was the main guy in his ear telling him, hey, we need to get out of this thing. And then he designated the IRGC as on the terrorist on the FTO list. So,
Sure.
and then
But it could just be that Trump is just like a mega cuck for Israel, right? Nobody's forcing Trump to put fucking who was it? Fucking Huckabee as our ambassador to Israel now. Like Trump is still cucking out to Israel now. He doesn't need the money anymore. He's got a billion other scams he's running in the U.S.
Oh yeah, but that's my point. Once again, Israel.
Wait, what's your point? How is it that every time they support them and every time they don't support him, it's like always somehow fits your theory? Like either Obama has a spine and then Trump was forced and Trump won, but then he does the exact same thing in Trump too, even though he's not forced in Trump too. Like every single thing can be explained by the same like conspiracy. Like, oh, they did a secret paper or they wrote the clean break memo in order to get the U.S. to go to war, but it didn't work or do anything. So then they had to fabricate the anthrax thing. Well, why would they even write the memo? They should just fabricate the anthrax thing. Like every single thing can always be explained by whatever conspiracy. Like there's no way I can't even falsify any of it. Like,
okay, so here's the thing. Okay, number one. The argument is, who is the bigger barrier to peace? My argument is that it's the Israelis, and I'm using the angle of them pulling out the JCPOA. Now, with that said,
the argument is who's a bigger detriment to peace between Israel and the Palestinians, right? The Palestinians can't be a detriment to peace with the Iranians. That's not even relevant, right? Insofar as Israel...
Yes, it is, because the Iranians back Hamas and back the Palestinians. So yes, it is a detriment to peace. So
but they only back the Palestinians because they don't like Israel. They don't give a fuck about the Palestinians. They just do it because they're trying to fight with Israel and Saudi Arabia and the United States.
Because Israel is a rogue state that has a nuclear weapon. So obviously the acts of resistance was created to insulate themselves and protect themselves.
How is Israel more of a rogue state than? Is it more of a rogue state than Yemen?
It's more of a rogue. You could make the argument. I think
is it more of a rogue state
than Iran? It's more of a rogue state than Iran. Iran was a part of the JCPOA. It was a part of the International Non-Proliferation Treaty. They actually had inspectors come in. Israel has a nuclear bomb that's illegal. That they stole from us.
So having a nuclear bomb makes you a rogue state? Isn't that like the exact 100%. Opposite? Wouldn't you imagine that a rogue state having
that you stole?
Okay, 100%. I feel like that every other person on the planet would say that is the exact opposite. A rogue state having a nuclear bomb seems like the worst possible thing ever. I think that if they were a rogue state, they would have used it or something, right? That's definitionally like a rogue state is one that can't be controlled or...
Destiny. They bombed Qatar like 2 weeks ago.
Okay.
That is one of our main allies with the biggest military base. You know how crazy that is that they bombed one of our allies?
It's people. Everybody bombs people. Like, Iran has bombed Saudi Arabia. Like, what do you mean? Like, yeah, they bomb each other over there. What do you mean?
Destiny. We give them a lot of their aid. We give them billions upon billions of dollars. I think this year alone we've given them like $16 billion.
Yeah, sure, yeah.
And they bombed Qatar. Qatar has the biggest military base, U.S. military base there. That is one of our close allies. They are the intermediary to try to stop this war, and they still bomb them. That's crazy, dude.
Well, yeah, but it's not like they're not like bombing. You're making it sound like they're like fucking carpet bombing their cities or some shit, right? It's not like they're out there like, they're definitely targeting.
Let me refresh my page.
Sure.
Can you guys still hear me?
Yeah. But I think
my video's frozen. Sorry.
Sure. I think the big issue is that like Trump has absolutely no desire or control of Israel or any idea what the fuck is going on in the Middle East. So now Israel is doing, as I've said from the beginning of this debate, I feel like there's a really hard point to understand for most people. Israel will try to do as much as it can get away with, but Israel has constraints internationally and constraints domestically. When those constraints disappear, you can see some crazy shit, although arguably that might be true for literally any state, right? Who knows what North Korea would act like absent a China? Who knows what...
do you think Myron said? Can you hear us?
Oh, maybe not, yeah.
No, I'm here. Can you? I just can't see. You guys just can't see me. I'm restarting my... I think it says here that your device struggling to record. I think it's recording on your end, Ellie. Maybe that's what the problem is.
It's probably recording mine, but I'm not sure why it's not recording on your end.
Yeah.
It says you've stopped recording now. Oh, he's left.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, I think it's taking quite a long time. Should we start heading up? Start aiming to finish in terms of...
Yeah, sure. Isn't it like fucking 3 a.m. where you are?
4:45, 4:49.
Wow. You're a warrior.
All right. It's turning back on. Can you guys hear me?
Only a blue screen.
Yeah. I restarted my switcher. Hopefully it'll come back on here in a second.
Okay. Just before we continue, I think we're going to try to finish in the next few minutes as well. So just keep that in mind.
Yeah, sure. But yeah, so going back to what I was saying, with the whole the JCPOA and everything else like that, I think that Israel is a bigger rogue state because they bomb they assassinate negotiators, they do clandestine operations, they do false flags, they undermine us all the time as their main person. Did you know that back in the Bush era that they had tried to get a false flag Mossad operatives, literally pretended to be CIA operatives, and they tried to arm the Jundullah to conduct a terrorist attack in Tehran at the end of the Bush administration? This is back like 2007, 2008, and they obviously the Iranians foiled the plan, but then they found out that Jundullah was actually being supported by Mossad, and they figured it out. But they were planning to be CIA guys. Like the Israelis constantly do bullshit in the Middle East and try to get us involved in it.
I understand, but everybody does bullshit in the Middle East. And to say Bush knew about this, Bush was literally the one that put Iran on the axis of evil. The IRGC, led by Soleimani,
he didn't want to go to war with them.
No, but we were already at war with them largely, right? Like the Iran and the Quds Force have been doing tons of intervention in Iraq. Like arguably a lot of the deaths that happened there were a result literally of foreign Iranian operatives. A lot of what was going on in Syria was a result of, assistance from Iranian foreign operatives, or the money or the resources or the training that they would send to Hezbollah in southern Lebanon. Like, yeah, Iran does shit all across the Middle East. They're like the fucking America or Russia of the Middle East. Yeah.
But the difference is that we don't give billions of dollars in aid to Iran. We give it to Israel. They need to be beholden to us, but they're a rogue state that does reckless stuff. I mean, the fact that
but they probably
Qatar
are generally. Now, I'm not going to say prior to Trump too. I don't know how wild it necessarily is. It's kind of wild, but the issue we have right now is that the president is a fucking retard and doesn't know anything about the Middle East, so he doesn't give a fuck about anything that happens there. That's our big deal now. So now you're seeing people act crazy. But
yeah, he's too controlled by the Jews. Is the problem.
He's not controlled by the Jews. He's a retard.
He 100% is.
He's retarded. That's the issue. If
retarded on some things.
On all things.
on the Middle East, yes, 100% cucked and owned by them boys.
Okay. I think that yeah.
Yes, just admit that the Israelis are the main problem, bro. Just admit it, and I'm happy.
But they're not, though. Like, you're retarded if you think, like, oh, who would I rather have run the Middle East? Like, there's a reason why most of the Middle Eastern leadership is totally fine with Israel, even if the Arab Street, is not the, it doesn't have the nicest thing to say about the fucking Mediterranean Jew, right? Most of the Arab leadership is like, you know what? I think I'd rather fucking Israel be in charge of this shit than Iran. Are you serious? Then fucking Assad. Then these are like the worst motherfuckers in the world. Yeah, he is now. Yeah, or fucking Saddam Hussein. Like, these are the worst people in the world. The fucking Houthi family. These are the worst people in the world. The Muslim Brotherhood in fucking Cairo. These are the worst motherfuckers in the world. And you're like, God, Israel is a fucking rogue state. They're fucking terrible and horrible. You would do, if you living in any one of these motherfucking places, like every fucking person would rather live in Egypt, or not in Egypt, in fucking Israel. Like fucking Arabs would rather live in fucking Israel. Arabs who live in Israel do better than Arabs living in any of these fucking surrounding, fuck states.
Hold on, Destiny. That's not the argument. The argument is simply, remember, the debate is, who is the bigger obstacle to peace? I'm saying the Israelis.
I understand that's the debate is, but you're making it about the entire Middle East. We were talking about the biggest obstacles to peace between Palestinians and the Israelis, and you were talking about the broader Middle Eastern region. But I'm saying that the broader Middle Eastern region, Palestinians aren't even going to have like any influence on this, of course. But between the Palestinians and the Israelis, the Palestinians will never settle for peace with the Israelis because they always feel like they can get more, so they have no incentive to do it. At this point, Israelis are radicalized so much that they figure Palestinians don't ever want peace, so they're going to keep fighting with them, and that's where we're going to go indefinitely until some international leader takes an interest in it and pushes for it.
The Israelis illegally occupy them. Okay, they're in apartheid. They don't have any representation. They're being occupied by a foreign government. They have no rights, nothing. So yeah, of course they're going to resist. And according to international law, they have the right to resist because what Israel is doing is illegal. Everything about Israel is illegal. The settlements, the way the country came as a formation, everything about it, according to international law, is illegal.
That's what all the Palestinians think, and that's why they'll never settle for peace because they think it's all illegal and it doesn't count, and the international community is going to save them.
And here's the other thing too. And the Israelis don't even want to make it right and come to some type of two-state solution or bring them in.
Nobody there wants a two-state solution. Nobody knows what a two-state solution would look like. And a one-state solution, nobody would agree to that either because that includes an infinite right of return.
But my point is, who is the obstacle to peace? It is the Israelis, because since they don't want to solve the Palestinian question,
the Palestinians don't want to solve it either, though. What do the Palestinians want? Really, what do the Palestinians want?
Right to self-determination.
What does that mean? Why you can't speak in riddles? Sovereignty and right to self-determination. What does that mean?
Having a citizenship, being able to not be in a apartheid state where they're second-class citizens.
What do you do with the 5 to 7 million Palestinian refugees? Okay, nobody wants to talk about that. That's one of the huge issues that the Palestinians won't touch.
I didn't say the right of return. I didn't say.
I know you didn't, but that's what comes up all the time. That's one of the huge things. Even that you brought up the Arab peace resolutions or whatever before. That's a huge fucking thing.
No. That's not. Here's the thing. Most of the Palestinians now understand that that's probably not going to happen. A two-state solution with sovereignty and their own ability to have self-determination, which means their own government, their own military.
That's fine that you think this as a Westerner. No Palestinian has ever given up any right of return ever. No Palestinian leadership has ever put on paper the number of right of return refugees that would come back. That's never happened. That's great for you to say that, but they've never acknowledged that.
Well, here's the thing: they won't even give them the right to self-determination. So how the hell are they going to even get?
These are flower words. They mean
right
nothing. What the fuck is right of self-determination? This doesn't mean anything.
It's simple, Destiny. Being able to govern themselves and being able to have their own
Hamas governed themselves. The Palestinian Authority governs itself. What do you mean?
With their own military, where they're not occupied, where they have their own airspace, they have their own water. They're not control. Their food and the power isn't controlled by the Israelis, where they can turn it off at any single time. That's why we got a fucking genocide going on with famine, because the Israelis control everything. That proves my point that they're absolutely occupied. The fact that they're starving them. So having their own sovereignty, Destiny. You're smart. You know what that means. Being able to have their own real country. That's what it comes down to.
Sure. Where's the leader that's negotiating for that? This doesn't exist. There's no deal. There's nobody saying
and they don't give it to them.
No, they haven't.
The Oslo Accords was the closest to that, and they killed the fucking guy that set it up, bro. And the Oslo Accords was simply the framework. We didn't even get to that point yet. But they fucking killed them. That's how much the Israelis don't want to have peace. They're the biggest sabotagers to peace. And everybody in the international community would agree with me. This is why nobody likes Israel. This is why, literally today, why do you think the Brits and the Australians and the Canadians recognize the Palestinian state? Because they understand that this is some bullshit that Israel's been doing for 70, 80 years. They know
talk is cheap. Yeah, that's fine. They can say what they want, but at the end of the day, nobody is like intervening to do anything. It's all of this is just to make people feel good about themselves. Is why Canada invented a new definition of genocide to say that they were genociding their natives so they could feel good about themselves, because it's a pat on the back. But at the end of the day, none of these people are fucking doing anything to advance any of the causes.
Every genocide expert, every scholar is coming out saying that this is a genocide, because it doesn't.
This doesn't mean anything. That's fine. It's a genocide. You can say that. Look. Okay, let's say that. Now, how much closer are we to figuring out the solution? None. If anything, now you're further away. Why the fuck would you make a peaceful solution with a person who's genociding you? Like, all you're doing is infinitely incentivizing both sides to fight forever, and they will continue to fight. Why would you make peace with somebody who's apartheiding you, genociding you, ethnic cleansing you, starvationing you? Like, what the fuck?
Well, here's the thing. Israel is losing the support of the international community.
But that shouldn't matter to you. Wait, how can they lose that? Wait. How can they lose the support? I thought you said they control everything with all the Israeli money and all the Israeli propaganda.
You're right. They do control everything, but that support is starting to wane. People on the left already, your entire
Wait,
party,
how can it wane if they're controlling it all with money and propaganda?
Okay, can I explain? So for a very long time, talking about Jewish power or Zionism was banned on social media platforms. We all know this. However, the October 7th attacks and the current genocide going on has brought it to the forefront of conversation. Now that it's the forefront of conversation, we got people on the left condemning what Israel's doing. This is a topic that the left typically didn't really know about or care too much about unless they were really vested in Middle Eastern
I understand what you're saying.
policy.
You're just explaining reality now. But before this, apparently Israel controlled all of reality. So what the fuck is the point of all the propaganda and the money and the Adelsons and everybody else if they can't actually control any of the media?
Sure. No. Well, here's the thing. They can't control the media anymore because we don't have to deal with Fox News and CNN anymore. Now we got independent media. People are coming out saying,
you literally just said that we couldn't talk about this on independent media. I thought, don't you guys complain about the ADL controlling YouTube policy and Facebook policy and Twitter policy and everything else?
Yes.
So how do they lose that if they control it all?
Sure. I'll explain that. Because before, if you talked about any of these topics before, the ADL, SPLC would target you immediately. But now everyone, people on both the right and on the left, it used to be the right that they would target when they would talk about this shit. They would ban me, demonetize me, ban Nick Fuentes, etc. But guess what? Now Hassan's talking about it every single day. Now Kyle Kalinski's talking about it all the time. Now guys on the left are talking about it. And then other people are talking about it on TikTok. TikTok was another thing that they didn't see coming. So everybody from different political angles are seeing what Israel's doing, say this is fucking bullshit. Well, guess what? The ADL can't ban everybody. So now that it's coming out, what Israel's doing and the world is waking up, now this has been brought to the forefront. And this is why Israel's getting absolutely decimated in the press. That's why Netanyahu's running around doing all these stupid-ass softball interviews, but won't do an interview with someone that's going to ask him real questions because he knows he's conducting a genocide. He obviously, everybody feels like there was a stand-down order. How the hell did the IDF take 6 hours to respond? We know the Hannibal Directive was activated on that day. We know that they went ahead and sabotaged a bunch of shit. That it could have included peace, included getting their hostages back on October 10th. So he doesn't want to do any real interviews. Israel's getting cooked, and they're losing support. And the United States is waning support on them right now as well. Even Trump admitted, "Damn, it's really tough to defend Israel nowadays."
Okay, where we at, Eli?
Yeah, we should probably just wrap up. Do you want to give a 1 minute recap each, or?
Sure. Desi, you want to go first, since I've went first every time?
Yeah, I feel like I feel like I've stated my position a million times. Like on the final part, it's difficult arguing against all the Jewish conspiracies because they're simultaneously the most competent propagandized people ever who can control every single part of the media. But then when too many people notice, all of a sudden they have no control over any of the media. It's impossible to argue against these Mossad organizations that are at some points in U.S. history so powerful that they're literally assassinating presidents and stealing enriched uranium for nuclear programs. And then at other points so weak and cucked that Alex Jones and Myron Gaines and other people and Hassan Piker are able to fight against them on the powerful alternative media platforms on YouTube. The reality is the ADL and all these these platforms were banning these motherfuckers like crazy in 2021, 2020, and then they reversed course on their policy for probably because they felt like the censorship was too much. But I just don't understand how like the Jewish conspiracy shit is like so powerful at other points and then so weak and cocked at other points. It doesn't make any sense to me. But like it's always infinitely explanatory of literally everything except for when we don't want it to be, and then it's not. So I don't know. Good. Hopefully the forces of good prevail, I guess.
Okay. Okay, so my summary, I'll try to make it quick here, but I'll summarize almost everything here. So nice and simple. My argument is simply that the Israelis have been the biggest obstacle to peace in the region, chiefly because they keep ignoring the Palestine question. We figured this out since 1937 up until now to 2025. Peel Commission, we know your boy Ben Gurion had no interest in actually doing any type of deal with the Palestinians because he wrote to his son in letters in 1937 that the goal was to always take Palestine in whole. So first it was 20%, then they moved it up in the 1947 partition plan to 56%. And then obviously that led to the war. The Israelis won that war and declared their independence. That war was done through paramilitary groups like the Irgun, Haganah, Stern gang. The very terrorism that they condemn today is exactly how the country was formulated in the beginning. Then that leads us to fast forward to the 1967 war, where we had the 242 agreement, which was literally written ambiguously. It was written purposely in that way so that the Israelis can stall for time. It wasn't until they made a deal with the Egyptians in the Camp David Accords in 1978 where they left the Palestinians out completely, and they also left them out in the 1967 242 plan as well. And then what ended up happening after 1967, they procured a nuclear bomb during this period of time against the advice of our president, former President John F. Kennedy, which is another escalation. Obviously, the Yom Kippur War happened. They threatened to use a nuclear bomb in there, once again, subverting the peace process, putting Nixon in a very difficult spot where we had to give them the biggest airlift so they can win the Yom Kippur War because they would have lost. Then you fast forward to 1993 with the Oslo Accords. Yasser Arafat conceded and gave them the ability to be recognized as a state, their sovereignty, and denouncing violence, and the fact that Israel has the right to exist. Yitzhak Rabin, all he gave him in exchange was the PA, which was nothing more than a security force that worked on behalf of the Israeli government and the Shin Bet. What ended up happening after that, a year later, Yitzhak Rabin gets assassinated by a far-right member of the Likud party. Benjamin Netanyahu takes power after that. The clean break memo is written where they write up in our strategy of how they're going to take over the Middle East, 7 different countries. Fast forward over to the Camp David Accords in 2000. That was a bullshit deal. The West Bank was fractured for the Palestinians. The Israelis maintain all the main resources, all the fertile ground, all the waterways. They control 60% of the West Bank. They continue to expand it. In the time that Yitzhak Rabin was done, it was kicking the can, which would give them more time to expand because the Israelis practice this very devious tactic of facts on the ground, which basically is, hey, let's go ahead and have a peace deal now. And then a year passes by, 2 years pass by, they expand the settlement. Oh yeah, well, we can't negotiate like that anymore, blah, blah, blah. And they've done this purposely. They always kick the can down the road. And we know this based off what's going on in 2023. Then you fast forward in 2001, the war on terror. We know that was a lie because PNAC and the clean break memo and the Jewish neocons that ran our American foreign policy in the early 2000s basically got us into war with Saddam Hussein and Iraq, which didn't benefit us at all. Once again, subverting the peace process. Then we fast forward into October 2023. Many people think that Benjamin Netanyahu allowed the conflict to happen because he benefited from it. He was able to invade every country he wanted to invade. He was able to operate his Mossad operations that he wanted to do with Operation Rising Lions, Operation Pager Attack. And he was able to keep himself out of prison. I forgot to mention that as well. He had quite a bit to gain from waging a war on 7 different fronts and keeping himself out of prison, which he definitely would have been convicted of on the corruption trial. So, and then they also got the United States to pull out of the JCPOA, once again, subverting peace by giving an enormous amount of pressure on Mike Pompeo, on Donald Trump, to pull him out while simultaneously maintaining an illegal nuclear program that they procured against the wishes of our former president, John F. Kennedy. So that, for all those different reasons, which obviously I'm summarizing from a bird's eye view here, for all these reasons, this is why Israel has been the biggest obstacle to peace in the region by not giving the Palestinians a state and creating wars all across the Middle East up until this day and refusing peace up until the point where they literally bombed one of our best allies in the region with our biggest military base, once again subverting American influence in the region, embarrassing us, putting us in a bad political space because the Israelis don't give a fuck about peace. They just want war and they want to have the hegemony in the region.
Well, thank you so much for coming on.
Awesome.
Thanks for having me on, bro. It was a good discussion. Destiny, it's always good to talk to you, bro.
Yeah, I appreciate the conversation.
All right. I'll stay on stream, guys. But shout out to you guys. You guys want to shout out your stuff, where people can find you?
You can search up Eli Hassel on YouTube. I'm sure everyone knows Destiny.
Yeah, youtube.com/destiny, kick.com/destiny. Fun
And also,
times.
wait a second. Also your payment thing that people can subscribe to.
Yeah, where's your
Destiny.gg.
Destiny.g? Okay, cool. All right,
Have fun. Thanks a lot. I'll see you guys later.
all right, man. Later, guys.
Peace out.
Peace.
Thank you so much. See you.
Good time. All right. Cool. Let me close this up.
God damn. What'd you think of all that? I mean, I pushed it, I think, as hard as I could have on this debate, but like, it's really hard to move on when you have big factual disagreements that you can like just look up. Like, so from like the very, very, very beginning, right? Did Jews conquer the land from the Arabs, or did they buy it and kick them off? Like, if we're disagreeing on stuff that early, like so much of these arguments, you write, is history. Like, history only happens one way, and everything is obviously causal because it's happening in a causal chain. So it's hard when we're having disagreements on like facts like that to just kind of like skip past it, because if you're disagreeing on some facts, you can justify some acts, and then those acts can justify other acts, and then yeah. Do you realize there's zero evidence of Yigal Amir voting or being a member of Likud? Oh, I don't know. Maybe he is, maybe, or he might not be, but it doesn't even matter. Even if he was Likud, it's to say that like they made him do some assassination. Just I think silly. I've never even heard that theory before, though. I guess if Rabin's wife wrote a book on it, I don't know if she did or if she just mentioned it in a book or not, but. Can I get a what the helly true? Do you ever think of doing a deep dive on the actual conspiracies to debunk smaller details? Oh, I feel like I have for some of them, but then like other ones come up and it's like I don't even know what to say. Like for Israel, like why the fuck would Israel have been invested in Britain getting back its fucking I've never even heard Iran brought up in the Middle East in regards to Israel prior to like 2001 or whatever. Like I don't know. I don't even know what to say to that. Like it helps them. Okay. I don't know. What is this? Hillary Clinton, I want to be part of your war council. Barack Obama, Michelle and I are supported, but are not going to put a finger on the scale right now. Bernie Sanders, please focus on the working class, not just an abortion. Nancy Pelosi, we should have some kind of primary, not an appointment or an anointment. The best moments in 107 Days happen when Harris is open about what she saw and clear about what she really thinks. When this memoir is truly a book about a campaign and not just one more politician's campaign book. One such episode occurs early in the book when Harris calls numerous Democratic luminaries immediately after Biden left the race, hoping to enlist their support, and her recollections of the exchanges nicely capture their personalities. I'm going to be part of your war council, Hillary Clinton said, suiting up for battle. Barack Obama demurred. Bernie Sanders on brand. Then there's Gavin Newsom, governor of Harris's home state, who simply responded, hiking will call back, and he never did. I thought I read something where this was so confusing. Oh my God, I thought I was looking at a map for a second. Yeah, I thought Newsom said it was like an unknown number or something. I don't know how true that is, but... Fuck me. I'm like, there's no way I'm coming back tonight. I'm going to sleep. All right, I'll be back tomorrow. Stay safe. Be careful. I love you all very much. Oh, connections. We need to connect. True. Crossword, area, A's. Orca. area, R's, Oreo, E's, volume, domino, encore, length, Excalibur, perimeter, O's, and Luxor. Things, geometry, bullshit. Are these part of like a stupid fucking performance? Like an aria? Is it spelled that way? An encore? No. Black and white things? Oreo, domino, crossword, orca? Are those like the killer whales? Am I making that up? Oh, please don't be one off. Oh my god, I'm so smart. Jesus Christ. Thank you, Free Willy. Alright, what do we got here? I don't know what the fuck any of this is, but it looks like it goes together. Aria, R's, O's, A's, I's. Oh wait, this is stupid. A's, E's, O's, R's. It's like letters. Cringe. I don't know what the fuck this shit is. Some Middle Ages bullshit. Just kidding. Las Vegas Casino. Hotels. I don't think I've heard of any of these. Maybe the Luxor? Maybe? Jesus.